My type was tall, long, blonde hair. Sarah is short and black-haired brunette. I had come to the conclusion that my attraction, my sexual emotional attraction radar, I'd come to the conclusion that I had been just letting that run instinctively, decadent romanticism, and realizing that was really screwing me up, getting me into bad relationships. And so I decided to do active open-mindedness. I got very, very clearly what's the type I keep getting attracted to physically, physiologically, because first appearances, she didn't trigger my initial type. So my salience radar wasn't going off. But instead, I had a sense there's something more to this woman.
In an economy where money's not being manipulated or printed, the movement of that price gives you maximal information about supply and demand. But if the money's being printed arbitrarily, well, then you don't know. Like, did the housing price go up because there's more dollars in circulation or because people actually want more houses? So you basically are introducing noise into the channel. And so to the extent noise is a lie or a deception, and private property of savers is being violated. So the people that are saving in the currency, they want their purchasing power to, stay the same or go up over time, or having their purchasing power diminished. We're in this culture today where people often celebrate, or at least they say, it's a stated want to celebrate first principles thinkers, first principles thinking. You hear this a lot from Elon Musk and other entrepreneurs talking about the importance of first principles. And it always struck me as a bit ironic that they named that in a plural, right? First principles. Clearly, there's different principles that are probably first in different categories, but if you really distill it all the way down, as a Neoplatonist would likely agree, there has to be one first principle, right? There can only be one first principle by definition, because if there was a second first principle, then it wouldn't be first. So, and as I've learned from your work, and I've now read several books on this, that Neoplatonism describes that, which I think is both an ineffable and a paradoxical first principle. It describes it as the one.
Right, but it's not a numerical one.
But not the arithmetic one, which is actually the next thing I said. As you've said, this is not the arithmetic one, but rather it is the first in line in terms of ontological priority.
Yes. I think this is even convergent with your work. It's better to turn the one into a verb than a noun.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're talking about is whenever we're trying to know something, we are engaged in wanting. We're trying to draw all of its properties together and its relations, be they causal or temporal. We understand when we can one. When we get a new theory, we take domains that were previously separate and we one them together. Oh, look, these actually fit together. They belong together. They are one together. So that's the principle of things being known. And we can talk a lot about that and intelligibility. But there's also the principle of things being. Everything, I like Spinoza on this. This is everything has to have a kinetis. Everything has to be oneing itself. It has to be sort of holding itself together. And you can think of that in terms of dynamical systems theory, that everything is a self-organizing dynamical system at some level of organization. So in order for things to be, they are oneing. And in order for them to be knowable, they are oneing. And then, as you said, you start to ask, well, where does this all lead? Where does the one? What does the oneing culminate in? And the oneing culminates in, this is the Neoplatonic claim, it culminates in a principle of oneing. It is that which is the ground of all of the acts of knowing, all of the acts of self-organization, and all the ways in which the knowing and being known fit together, belong together. And the Neoplatonic argument is, on the cognitive side, that's a primordial presupposition. At some point, I want to talk to you the difference between that and a foundation, because first principles can equivocate between those two proposals.
Okay.
A primordial presupposition is, you can say, well, couldn't it be wrong And then I'd say, but what would I use? What process would I use to determine it was wrong? I would use the very same
Mm,
processes, right? I'm relying on the processes being self-correcting, which is a form of oneing, right? And
mm-hmm,
both in being and being known. And so I can't, there's no, and then now I'll sound like Nishida, there's no place I
mm-hmm,
can stand where I'm not using these processes. So I have to primordially presuppose them. And this gives you a different notion of faith, by the way. That sense of participating in primordial presuppositions is not the sense of faith as believing without argument or evidence. It's instead, no, it's like, no,
right.
I participate in this and I am bound to it because I can do no other, but I don't feel enslaved by it because it
Mm-hmm,
precisely affords all of my behavior. So it's the ground of both necessity and voluntary um, action, if you want to put it that way. Although I think action mixes both, but we can get back to that.
mm-hmm,
But this is the notion of voluntary necessity, like what you find in love, or because when I love somebody, like I I couldn't think of, I can't think, or I couldn't bring myself to be with anybody other than Sarah. But I don't feel enslaved. I feel
mm-hmm,
enlivened. I read a great argument and I find the conclusion compelling. I don't feel enslaved. I feel enlivened. I'm beholding something beautiful in it. I'm held in place. Behold, right? I, I can't do any other, but I don't feel enslaved. I feel enlivened. Voluntary necessity is the way we participate in this primordial process. Now, that's our knowing. And then the argument that you alluded to is, well, how many like how many principles of the can there be? And then you get basically an argument. I think Spinoza does it clearly, but it goes back to Plotinus, which is, well, if you had two, you'd need some principle of intelligibility between them,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And neither one of those would be ultimate because they'd both be constrained by the other. So I have to have something that all the relations come from, but is not itself a relation. It is the affordance of all relation, which means anything that's relational, any pattern, information is relational,
mm-hmm.
causation is relational, anything that's relational emanates from this. That would be sort of the Neoplatonic principle of the one.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm seething already with so many connections, but I'm going to try to just stay sequential here on the outline. Another way you've described this is that the one is not a concept, but that by which all conceptualization is possible.
Exactly, exactly. So,
Uh,
oh, go ahead. Sorry, Robert.
I just wanted to go, and this is obviously strange because we're talking about the thing that's beyond concepts and words.
Yes.
But can we attempt to, or rather, can I ask you to attempt to define or at least describe the sensible or knowable effects of the one? Because it does seem like it is, well, ineffable and paradoxical. So we're sort of stuck with, I don't know, analogies, metaphors, gestures.
Yeah. I mean, so um, the I'm just thinking a way to do this is to Woodward's fundamental work on causation. That what we're talking about causation is we're talking about making a difference.
Mm,
That when there's right, and when we think we have a causal relationship, we say there's a reliable way in which making a difference happens. And so I want to be very clear about that because if you think of the one as like causing the way one rock hits another and causes it to move, then you've already lost the game. You've lost the plot.
mhm,
So you have to think of it more as making a difference. And this is why I think, Nishida and Mark Wynn's work about thinking about the one or God more on the analogy of a place
mhm,
rather than a thing, right? Um, and so what the one does is it's not a physical place. It's not it's but what it does is it's the place that makes all difference making possible. So for if you
mm,
say I know that, okay, you and that thing that you know are one in some way. Okay, that's the difference that was made by the one. Oh,
mm,
the fire it organizes itself. It's self-organizing. Well, that difference, before there wasn't fire, now there's fire, right? That is an emanation of the one. Now, I'm not a Platonian Neoplatonist, even though I think so much of Plotinus, because I'm a late Neoplatonist. I think the top-down emanation and the bottom-up emergence are equally real.
Hmm.
So you can see things organizing together and becoming greater and greater structures, and then you can think of like these overarching constraints. So a good example is E equals mc squared. That's not a thing, right? But
Hmm.
it's a constraint. It's kind of the place or the structure of possibility for how things can unfold, and they're both interpenetrating. And I want to give you now a deep answer to your question. That grammar of bottom up causation, like in the Newtonian sense, and top down, so emergence up,
Hmm.
emanation down, which seems to be how reality is realizing itself, is exactly the same grammar of how cognition works. Our,
Hmm.
our cognition works fundamentally bottom up, top down, predictive processing models. Even before predictive process, it was top down, bottom up, completely interpenetrating. And so the greatest difference that is made is, unlike sort of, at least, well, I, I'm about to say something, and I think that maybe I'll hold off. I was going to say one of the things that we're relying on is that the grammar of cognition, the grammar of knowing, I would think is a predictive processing, relevance realization, and the grammar of being, this what we're describing,
Hmm.
are participating in the same principle because they fit together.
Right.
That principle that makes this grammar, and more importantly, makes them belong and fit together, so they're participating in the both of these grammars are participating in the same principle.
Hmm.
That's the one.
The one, also called the good, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the idea is, and this is something I've been arguing for as well, that all of our normative judgments, and there's two senses of normative. One is stats. I'm not using that. I'm using the philosophical sense where we are talking how things should or ought to be. So all of our normative principles, uh, truth, goodness, beauty, intelligibility, are bound up with the normative judgment of it is real. So it is real is like real is a comparative. It's
Hmm.
not it's not like red, it's like tall. Whenever I'm saying that's real, I'm comparing it to something less real. The stick is a real stick, the shadow is not a real stick. And that's because there is a reliable relation, an asymmetrical relation of intelligibility. I can get more and more information from the stick. I can't do with the shadow. And that more and more information from the stick gives me the ability to understand the shadow. So that's
Hmm.
how we do that. And the idea is all of our normative judgments of true, good, beautiful, intelligible are all ways of saying real, always.
Hmm.
So you should believe what's true. Well, why? Well, because it's real. You should do that. Well, like that's a good thing to do. Well, why should you do? Because if you don't do that, you're not in touch with the reality of the person or the context. Or I mean, Robert, there's a much longer argument here. I'm just giving you
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
gist of the argument. And so the idea is that not only is remember that the stick has more intelligibility, right? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking. I'm seeking for what's the ultimate touchstone. Where's the inexhaustible source of all
Hmm.
that intelligibility that lets me make all the judgments of realness, that lets me make all the judgments of truth, goodness, and beauty? Well, that's the one.
Beautiful. Okay. Geez, I was going to ask this later, but I feel like I have to ask it now because it's just jumping out at me. Intelligibility is such an important word in
Yes.
your work in Neoplatonism.
Yep.
Um, Again, I learned this through your book recommendation, which I'll ask more about this later, but I'll just ask this one question for now. Is intelligibility an affordance?
Yes. Um, in that it's intelligibility is um, the way the world is reaching towards your intelligence, and your intelligence can reach towards the world because of intelligibility.
Mhm.
Um, it's like the graspability of the cup. It's not the can. It's not in the can and the hand. My
Right.
hand, the mind. There's the thing known. There's the affordance of graspability, the real relation of fittedness. So intelligibility means there is a real relationship of fittedness between your intelligence and the way reality is realizing itself. Or to use my language, your relevance realization is right can couple to how reality is realizing itself.
Mm. Does that entail then, if intelligibility is an affordance, does that entail that it is a subspecies of action if affordance is defined as a real possibility or pathway for action, right, between an organism and the environment?
So the okay, so this is good. We're at um, so there's a difficulty around the word action, and before I answer that, I want to ask you some questions because I want to get
Hmm.
clear. Because there's a lot of potential equivocations around action, especially, and there's a lot of philosophical work. So one thing I can mean by action is something that's done by an agent, by an actor,
Hmm.
and that would be an agent is a being that can determine the consequences of its behavior and change its consequences to reach a desired goal.
Hmm.
That's an action. So if something can change its behavior in order to increase its chances of reaching a desired goal, that's an action. And
Hmm.
so by that definition of action, when a rock rolls down a hill, that's not an action. It's an
Hmm.
activity.
Hmm.
There's a difference there because there's a sense in which there if we think that physics is right, and I'm willing to question that, but let's
It's
just go with that idea.
autopoiesis.
Pardon me?
Autopoiesis is the difference.
Yes, exactly. So for if the system is not making itself, it doesn't have to take care of itself. So it doesn't have to
Hmm.
care about the world. It doesn't have to prioritize this state of the world over that state of the world. And if there is no caring or prioritization, which are the two fundamental functions of attention, selective attention, then I would say there's no action. So if you wanted to put it in a slogan, if it doesn't have attention, it's not engaging in action.
Mm.
Now, you may say, and the problem is we have this other word that has the word action in it, interaction. Like the
Hmm.
wind hits the rock, and that's an interaction. But does that
Hmm.
mean the wind was acting? Again, acting is equivocal between activity and action, and so um, the question that emerges now, to go back to your question, is the intelligibility as an affordance. Does that mean that the universe isn't intelligible when there are no cognitive agents? I find that not possible to believe for
Hmm.
very good
Hmm.
reasons, right? Because then how like that you get into performative contradiction if you try to say, well, we evolved, right,
Hmm.
and things like that. So instead, what I think you see physics doing is uh, it's trying to say there is a world side of intelligibility that exists independent of human beings, and that's information in the technical sense.
Mm.
That's information, and then information has always as always there, and that's the kind of intelligibility that is always present. And then there's the intelligibility when we care about and prioritize relevance realization, some information over others, then we become creatures of, like, we're actors. uh,
Hmm.
so I don't know if that answered your question, but
No,
yeah,
no, it is very helpful. And agreed. I need to be very clear about the word action
yeah,
and where I'm coming from, which will become more clear as we go. But I'm coming from the perspective of Mises and his book Human Action, and the science of praxeology that he developed.
yes,
And in so few words, he basically says action is goal directed behavior.
hmm,
All right. So the purposeful use of means to pursue ends.
yeah,
Another important part of that is like it's objectively available means to pursue subjectively selected
yeah.
ends.
It's the fit between subjectivity and objectivity.
Yes, even the prior unity,
Yes.
even, right? It's not so much that subject and object come together in action, but it's that it's the unity prior to the split into subject and object.
and I totally, I haven't read him independently of you, but I think you make a very, and you know this term is important to me. You make a very plausible case for that reading, and I think that's right. I think that there is, um, I think both problems and adaptivity and the ability to adaptively solve problems, which is what we're
Hmm.
describing here, are
Hmm.
inherently transjective, or as William Desmond would say, following Plato, they're metaxu, they're between. And that
Yes.
between is not, as you said, it's not after subjectivity and objectivity, it is before, it is the
Hmm.
oneing. See, that the
Yes.
between is more of a one than either the subjective or the objective, because it explains how the subjective and the objective can both self-organize and fit together.
Yes. Yes. Bingo. Um, okay. I'll move on to the next. I did just one comment because you say it all the time, and I think it's very fascinating. That simultaneous top up and bottom down,
Yeah.
the emanation and the emergence
Yes.
that you said takes place in our cognition. It's also evolution by natural selection is doing the
Yes,
same
it's
thing.
evolution by natural selection. I think that's why, and I've argued repeatedly. If you look at the principles of variation and selection within some self-organizing feedback loop, that's biological evolution. If you look how relevance realization works, there's the sensory motor loop that is
Yes.
right variation and selection. It's the same principle, and
Right.
that's right. But there, but I've already made that point. So there you go.
Yes. Yes. And just that, I think that maps into affordances nicely too, because like obviously organisms are navigating their
Right,
environments via
totally, totally.
affordances, and that is what causes the ongoing process of niche construction and evolution more broadly. Um, okay, I want to go back to the first principles thing though, or the first principle, sorry. Um, because there are other paradoxical slash ineffable first principles
Yes,
mentioned in many other traditions.
the Tao, Brahman.
Exa-
Yes,
exactly. The Tao of Taoism, the pure experience of William James,
and
uh,
Nishida.
and absolute nothingness of Nishida,
Yeah,
the Dharma of Hinduism,
yeah,
Actus Purus of Aquinas,
yeah, yeah.
and the dynamic.
I figured you would like that one the best, but
Yeah, that's
yeah.
that's pretty direct, right? Dharma is actually pretty direct as well when you
Yep,
dig
yep,
into it.
yep,
And then dynamic quality of Robert Pirsig.
yep.
Um, so there's a lot of, I don't know, resonance or confluence,
I think of it as convergence because,
convergence.
like, I'm a process. So there's a big distinction in the philosophical literature between perennialism and constructivism, right? And the perennialists say, well, these great traditions are saying the same thing. And the constructivists say, no, everything that you say is totally constrained, constructed by your culture and your language. And it goes back and forth. One of the moves I make is, well, even the constructivists are process perennialists. They believe there are universal processes of language and categorization, or else
Mm-hmm.
they can't talk about other
Right.
times and other cultures and other places. They'd fall into a performative contradiction. That's what pure relativism does. So let's say so the real question is between product and process perennialism.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so my analogy for that is I think things like relevance realization are process, like they're perennial processes, but like like we just made a comparison to evolution. Evolution is a perennial process for life, but that doesn't mean the products are
Mm-hmm.
identical in their logical description, right?
Yes.
And so I would not say that the Taoist, uh, the Taoist and the Vedantist, that they're saying the same thing. The products are whatever that process is by which we participate in the one of the
Mm-hmm.
things it does is adaptively fit us to our biological ecology and our cultural history. And so when I sometimes like to do this, a practice where I'll try to be the Taoist at one with the Tao, and I've done Taoist practices for 30 years, so that's not an unreasonable thing, or or the Shunyata of Zen, or the one of Neoplatonism. And each one, I have to speak metaphorically, each one sort of tastes and orients me differently, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel that they all converge. But they're not converging on a thing.
Right.
They're converging on this no place in which all thinging and taking place um, happens.
The Basho.
Yeah, yeah, the Basho,
Yeah.
no place. The system of colors that system of differentiation and connection that makes colors, that system of intelligibility for colors is not itself a color.
Right. Yes. No, I think the distinction between product and process is very useful. I also like that it sort of echoes economics, right? We
Yep,
have
yep.
the market process. This is what Mises calls the market when he says, define the market. The market's a process. And then obviously it creates a lot of products.
Yes.
I think it also gestures toward reconciliation of the one and the many. You have the one
Yep.
universal process of evolution. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, discard it. But then you have infinite products of that, right? In terms of organisms and
And you
changes in the
have to.
environment.
You have to, because if the previous arguments we've been making about the one work, the one has to simultaneously be a source of inexhaustible intelligibility
Mm-hmm.
and like of the oneing. And so you have this is the Neoplatonic solution to the classic problem of the one and the many. And reality seems to have, so think about our participation, our sense of reality. So one is oneing. I can confirm. I can look what my
Mm-hmm.
hand does. I can confirm that all of here's that's my sense of realness, confirmation, oneing. But then there's whoa, I didn't expect that, and like the scientific experiment that falsifies your hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
That's surprise. That's the inexhaustibleness, and those are the two senses you always have to hold together in any account you're trying to give of what we're talking about when we're talking about ultimate reality.
It's fantastic. So a through line, perhaps, between all of these paradoxical first principles, and it comes out more in some than others, but it's that they all gesture towards the unity prior to subject object split.
Yes. Before prior to
Persig,
all the dichotomies,
yeah,
fact value
yes,
is all of them.
yes.
Yes.
Persig's very explicit about it. He talks dynamic and static. William James is pretty explicit about it, but I guess you've already mentioned it, but you've coined the term transjective for that
Yep.
middle way
Yes.
between subject and object. And I'm not sure. In Gibson's book, he says, affordances are neither subjective nor objective, or they're both. So it's
Yes.
like you get into this weird space where it's like, well, it's either neither or both. If
Yeah,
it's
I
the
think
prior
you.
unity, it's kind of both. But if it's
Yeah.
neither, depending if you're looking at the world as a process or a product, in a way.
Yes, exactly.
So could you just, I don't know, maybe you could talk about how these different paradoxical first principles are neither subjective nor objective, and then maybe just talk about transjectivity a bit and give
Sure.
some examples.
Well, maybe go that way. I mean, so like the adaptivity that we were talking about in evolution, it's not
Mm-hmm.
in the organism. The great white shark, my favorite example, you drop in the desert, it dies. Well, that means you can't live in the desert. It must be objective. No, there's lots of things that live in the desert because
Mm-hmm.
adaptivity is a real fit. Or another example that people don't pay enough attention to: a problem.
Mm-hmm.
A problem is a lack of fit in this. Is it objectively there? No, because you can come into the exact same state of affairs and have no problem. Is it
Yeah.
just subjective? No, because I can be wrong about how to solve my problem and
Mm-hmm.
need to be corrected. It's transjective. And there's a reason why adaptivity is the addressing of problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how an to be adaptive is for an autopoietic system to solve problems.
Yes.
And so adaptivity, problem, like you said, affordances, the graspability of the can. The graspability is in my hand. No, I can't grasp Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's in the can. No, a fly can't grasp the can, and all that sort of stuff. That's what Gibson was on about. I think Gibson was struggling because I mean he's a lot earlier when he writes the ecological approach to visual perception. That's in the 60s. Now, I was very privileged to become friends and colleagues and take classes with John Kennedy, one of his greatest proteges. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I'm pretty confident in what I'm going to say now. I think Gibson would like my term transjective. I think he would like Williams Desmond's retrieval of Plato's concept of the metaxu, the
Mm-hmm.
between. James Filler's point about the relations, you can't get the relations from the relata.
Mm-hmm.
I also think, by the way, and we maybe want to come back to this. I agree with James, and I've talked to him, but I also think you can't get the relata out of the relations, and
Right.
so you need something that's even deeper. And so, what is meant by transjectivity is the idea that trying to understand these dichotomies as historically created conceptual schemes. They don't, they haven't,
Mm-hmm.
they seem natural to us because they are like my glasses. They enable me to see. But what you can do is you can, and I'm going to use this term because this is the right context to use it. You can deconstruct that picture, like Wittgenstein,
Mm-hmm.
and Heidegger, and Derrida. You can actually show how it ultimately doesn't work, doesn't make any sense. And when you deconstruct that, then what you have is you have this world in which, like, the way things are communing with each other, the that which is below both the relations and the relata. And that's, sorry, I don't want to argue from authority, but what I'm trying to say is, when you can go through like a spiritual practice of doing that philosophical work of deconstructing the dichotomies, and then you start to perceive and participate in the
Mm-hmm.
world in a fundamentally different way. And this is what all the traditions are offering. I wanted to bring that out. So I'm trying to answer your question, Robert, because I mean, I hold you in a lot of respect and affection, but there's a sense in
Thank you.
which the complete answer to your question requires practice, not just argument.
Mm-hmm. Practice, pragmatics, all rooted in the word praxis,
Yes, very much.
praxeology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE.
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. It's becoming a bit of a religion, I think, for me, the whole actions speak louder than words thing, and I'm really trying to live it. And I know you are as well. Like, you
Yeah.
all, as much as you appreciate all the verbose philosophy, as much as I do, you always take it back to an ecology of practices, as you
Always,
say.
always, always.
Okay. All right. Transjectivity is that which is between it. Could we call it the
So
prior?
I sometimes do a bunch of B's. It's beneath, between, and beyond.
Wonderful. So we know we're close to something primary when all we have are these spatial metaphors to describe it, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
time.
yeah.
All right. So intelligibility is an affordance.
Yes.
Affordances are transjective. They're
Yes.
neither subjective nor objective. The three
Yeah.
B's you just mentioned. Now, another book that you led me to that I didn't realize this, but Pearl in his book Theophany.
Oh, what a beautiful. I think that is the single, well, that's why I recommended it to you. I think that's the single best introduction to Neoplatonism ever written.
It's so good. He's a master with language, and it's poetic, and it's very, yeah, it's fun to
It,
read.
it has to be because he's talking about one of my sage heroes. He's talking about Dionysius the Areopagite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm paraphrasing here, but in Theophany, Pearl, and he's citing obviously, I think it's Plotinus,
Yeah.
Proclus, etc.,
Yeah.
that to be is to be intelligible.
Yes.
That being and intelligibility are identified, and
Yeah.
that's it. Sounds maybe simple or silly, but like that one really struck me. And the argument was something like this: like to try and think of that which is unintelligible is a contradiction in terms,
Yes. Yes.
because the unintelligible means no content of thought and thus no thinking.
Yes. You get
So,
into a performative contradiction. So
yes,
propositional contradictions are where two statements can't simultaneously be true. Performative contradiction is when your statement it contradicts the state from which you're making the statement. So
yes,
a non-controversial example. I am completely unconscious right now. It's a
mm-hmm.
performative contradiction. It's not that I can't ever be completely unconscious. Of course I can, but I
Yes,
have to be conscious to make a statement. It's the same thing to say I'm thinking of something that's completely unintelligible. It's like
yeah,
that's a performative contradiction. Yeah.
yes, yes. No, excellent. And I've got a whole section on performative contradiction coming up. But yeah, the let me ask before we go there. So intelligibility is an affordance. Affordances are transjective. Isn't it the actual relations then, and the real, like the real fittedness between the organism and the environment that actually define affordances?
I think
Like we
so.
put it into words and we try to say, oh, it's prior to subject object and all that, but it's like we're really saying that no, it's even the word define we think is like, oh, definitions have to be in words, but I'm using the word define more like, it's not what you say that defines you, it's what you do that defines you, something
Sure,
like that. So
sure,
like
sure.
we're getting closer and closer to this, like what Pirsig would call the pre-intellectual or pre-conceptual cutting edge of reality, which is what Mises would probably call action. So yeah, how do we define, I guess affordances just seem to be like a really deep concept, and one in which we're getting to the edge of words, perhaps.
I think so. I mean, so this is something you won't get from Gibson, although you'll get it from other people like Camaro and others who are trying to get at what's the ontology, which is the study
Mm-hmm.
of the structure of being. What's the ontology underneath affordances? Gibson was mostly, and it's totally legitimate, by the way, he's
Mm-hmm.
mostly concerned with giving us a new way of understanding perception.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's basically participation in affordance rather than representing objects, which
Yes.
just savor that for a moment. That's a bloody brilliant innovation. And we're only now, the evidence is mounting that he's right and only now sort of getting the consequences. And again, I thank John Kennedy for leading me down that path. So let's go back to your proposal that, right, you said something like, isn't it the relations, in reality that make affordances possible, the way things fit to each other? Yes, as long as that, yes. And again, I'm going to have to keep going to the horizontal metaphors because the spatial metaphors. It doesn't just mean horizontally how organisms fit environment. It's also vertically how the emanation and emergence interpenetrate and fit together. You can see this in Michael Levin's work and other things. We can talk about that later if you want. And so there's a way in which, this is what I meant with reality is realizing itself, and that realization of reality, that's how Nishitani describes religion, the self-realization of reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? That makes the realization of relevance realization continually possible for us, and not in the merely epistemic. The possibility is real possibility, like potential energy and
Mm-hmm.
information. Information is the ruling out of possibilities, and information really exists. So the possibilities. So I'm trying to. real possibility, and that's what affordances are. They're the, as you said correctly, they're the possibilities for action.
Mhm.
And that possibility is given to us by the way, I like William Desmond's term, the way God, ultimate reality, possibilizes, right? Which
Mhm.
possibilizes, like that, the way reality realization unfolds to not only make us, but make us and the world together so that we fit together, so that our relevance realization can realize how reality is realizing itself. Sorry, my words are getting cumbersome, but we're struggling.
You're fortunately with someone who's listened to you for so many hundreds of hours. I think it's coming through.
Okay,
Um,
good.
possibility itself, then, because I was wrestling with this term. This may sound a little bit trite, but I'm not trying to be. Is it possible that possibility is a meta affordance of some kind? Like this is,
Yes,
and I want to go back, like kind of
yeah,
tying this into something you said earlier, where you're like, okay, I don't think that, if humans didn't exist or never existed, that does that mean reality was not ever intelligible in any way? So there's kind of this, I don't know, this strange,
yeah.
does the affordance exist when the organism exists or not? Like, is there a possibility of intelligibility prior to the existence of humans? But the thing that I kept coming back to was anything that we can say about that possibility or impossibility is some inference or some generalization. It's some,
Yeah.
mental model. And
Well,
so it
yeah,
seems like the like
yeah,
epistemology and ontology do ground out in I'm going to go back to it,
yeah.
praxis, where it's like we have to access everything we can access in reality is through our goal directed behavior. And I don't know that we can get, if there is anything beneath that, I think we can only infer that, and inference itself is an action.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot there. So I'll start with some critical pushback, and then we'll play together. Um, so one problem you don't want to get into is, this goes back to Brentano, is psychologism.
Mm,
Where you say, well, explanations are just psychological events, and therefore everything is ultimately psychological. But then you go, well, that thing you just did there, that was an explanation. Is that
mhm,
just psychological? And if it's just psychological, that means it doesn't actually really exist. Is that, do you, and you get into a performative
mhm.
contradiction. In a similar way, you don't want to say that the properties of your theorizing are the properties of what you're theorizing about. I'm
Right.
theorizing about, the sun, which is, massive and at a certain temperature. My act of theorizing is not massive at a certain temperature. So while I think it's the case, and Robert, to be fair to you, I've bumped up to similar issues around relevance realization.
Mm,
Everything we're doing is relevant. So the problem is, well, here I'll give you. I can make an analogous move, right? I can say, well, consciousness is transcendental in the Kantian sense, not the Platonic, meaning it's a condition on all possible knowing. So anything that I say,
mm,
anything that I do depends on consciousness. So therefore, everything is consciousness, and it's like that's problematic because you can also say everything I do depends that I'm on that I'm embodied. So everything is part of my body.
mm,
Um, and you get weird solipsisms and performative
mhm,
contradictions. And so I would argue you want to make a distinction between saying, whenever I'm thinking, I must be performing an act, to saying that whatever I'm thinking about must be an act. Because if you buy the previous arguments I made, that's not a valid argument. Now, what you might be saying, because I don't know which, I'm actually posing a question.
Okay.
You might be saying, well, I'm saying that action is a transcendental. It's like consciousness, it's like relevant realization, it's like embodiment. We always have to presuppose it
Mhm.
whenever we're trying to make any claim about what we know or what reality is. I don't have any problem with that second claim.
Okay. I think that's what I'm going towards.
Okay.
And there's more I have further down the outline here that will bring that out. Um, but just this idea, because you've said this as well, right? Like, and I appreciate what you said. Don't, you've said this many times, don't mistake properties of the theory for properties of the thing you're theorizing about, right?
That's
So
right.
do not mistake map for territory, etc. You have said, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, though, that relevance is undefinable,
Yes.
right? Although the theory of that does not mean the theory of relevance realization is pointless. Like there's a lot there, although the actual phenomenon, if that's the term for
So
relevance,
yeah.
cannot be
Well,
captured in words.
I want to be careful. Um, what I mean, what I meant, and then we can talk about what that might imply,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's undefinable in that I can't give a formal definition or a scientific definition of it. Why can't I give a formal definition? This is in the paper, first author with Johannes Jaeger. I was one of the co-authors.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever I'm using any formal system, and you know, I know you know Savage's work from statistics, right? Whenever I'm applying a formal system, I need a small world. I need a world
Oh
where
yeah.
all the information is clear,
Mm-hmm.
uh, no uncertainty. It's all been translated into risk. Complexity has been transformed completely into how complicated things are, meaning I can analyze it, all that stuff. And then Savage rightly said, right, the process of drawing from the way reality in of itself, he called it a grand world, but now we call it the
Ill-defined.
large world. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a large world. Yeah.
Yeah, the large world, right? That's a world that has genuine uncertainty into it, is combinatorially explosive, is dynamic, etc. The act of formalization cannot be itself done by a formal system
Right.
because you get a vicious third man, infinite regress.
Yeah.
Scientific definition. Well, the scientific definition requires that I can give you an essence over all the entities in the theory because that would allow me to get the generalizations I need. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, talking about horses is good because there's a lot of properties that make a difference that all horses share. So I can scientifically study horses, white things that are white, other than them being white. Doesn't there's no predictive generalization. Like I can learn everything about this white thing and that means I've learned nothing about the next white thing. I
Mm-hmm.
find so it lacks what's called systematicity. Relevance lacks systematicity
Mm.
because is this what try and find what is it that all the things I find relevant share other than them being relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And before you get nihilistic about that, but Darwin realized the fittedness of a creature works exactly the same way. There is no essence,
Right.
right? People don't get this. This is why Darwin's theory of evolution was such a challenge to the understanding of how God created things. Right? God has an eternal model in his mind and he makes things. Well, we should be able to figure out what that eternal model is or something like that. And what Darwin pointed out is, well, like fittedness is constantly redesigning itself. Take a look at all the creatures that are fit. What do they share in common other than they're fitted to the environment? Some are big, some are small, some are fast, some are slow. And so relevance, like adaptivity,
Mm-hmm.
can have a scientific essence and it can't be given a formal definition. That doesn't mean we can't talk about it, but what we can't do is we can't give a formal definition or a scientific essence for it.
Yeah. Again, Persig's metaphysics hits me here, where it's like he refers to dynamic quality as
Yes,
that pure process that you can never, finally say anything about with finality because it's always fully
that's right.
dynamic. And it seems like that's kind of what we're saying here again. It's like there's something about the pure dynamism of this
Yes,
processual ontology or universe that we're in that can never be captured in static words or formal definitions or formal systems.
I like that. And I've had several conversations with the greatest living disciple of Persig, Sibylla King,
Yeah.
and she basically says, she said to me, "I think your notion of relevance realization is what Persig means by dynamic quality."
Yeah.
And I like, okay, I've read Persig, I can see that. Um, so the thing about this is we're actually in a really strange Platonic space because let's do it. Okay, everything is completely dynamic. That's Heraclitus,
Mm-hmm.
Step in the same room. But wait, there have to be real patterns or they'd be unintelligible, and being has to be intelligible. That's
Right.
Parmenides. And what does Plato do? He says, they're both right.
Both.
They're
Yeah.
both right.
Yeah.
And this is how you make it work. And then the Neoplatonists come along and they say, Plato's onto something, but we got to clean this up. We got to get this emergence and emanation
Mm-hmm.
going. So, for example, I think we can talk about emergence, causal aspects of relevance, and constraints, emanation aspects. So, actualization and possibilization. We
Mm-hmm.
can, so, in that way, we can talk about relevance.
Yes. Okay. Um, yeah, that all lands. And I'm also, I guess, just to mix in something here, the whole idea of, well, we already said cognition is like that, the simultaneous emanation and
Yeah,
emergence,
yeah.
as is natural selection. I think the market process that Mises talks about is also the same way, right?
It has to be. I would be very strong about that because uh, uh, I think, okay, let's take things that I think are non-controversial, which is the market is a multi-leveled, complex, dynamic system, which means it has all kinds of feedback cycles.
Mm-hmm.
But the market is self-organizing. It's not just chaotic this then that, right? It
Mm-hmm.
self-organizes. Like people use the language of self-corrects and things like that,
Yep.
which means there has to be enabling constraints. We're using it in our words. There has to be things that introduce variation, novelty into the system,
Yep.
and then there have to be selective criteria that kill off a lot of those novelties, but some
Yes.
survive and then reshape how the market reproduces itself, feeds back onto itself. I, I, so what I'm saying, I'm giving an argument for this claim. I think the most plausible description of the market is as a dynamical system, which means there have to be bottom up causes, top down constraints, like I just did, and
Yep.
or you've got emergence and emanation as the grammar of the market. Yes.
Yes, no, that's wonderfully said. I think the variation is producers competing to introduce new products, and then the selection is consumers deciding which products suit
Yeah.
their needs and which
Yeah.
don't through buying.
There's probably, I mean, I think that's apparent. I think there's
Yeah.
also all kinds of things. I mean, so there's going to be not only innovations, there's going to be environmental historical changes that
Mm-hmm.
introduce new possibilities into the
Yes.
market. And then there's going to be external things from the environment, not just consumers like demand or choice. There's going to be, right, something could, you know, what we run out of X.
Yeah.
Like we just run out of X,
Mhm.
right? And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how much the demand for X is,
Yeah.
we can't get X, right? And so, what the reason I'm putting an emphasis on this is I'm trying to actually support your argument because all dynamical systems are inherently embedded in their environment because
Mm-hmm.
they are constantly making themselves out of their environment as they make the environment that they find themselves in.
Yes, sounds very much like niche construction.
Yes,
And
exactly.
the other thing that I just find to be interesting there is, and I mean, I guess animals do this to some extent, but not like us, that we really re-architect our possibility space
Oh
through
yeah.
through technology, technique, et cetera. And yeah, I don't know, the whole like cultural dimension of being human allows us to become very serious participants in the evolutionary process.
Yeah. And I think that's right. I mean, so if you look at organisms, I think all autopoietic organisms are agents and they shape the world and are shaped by the world. So they're agents in arenas.
Hmm.
Um, and we, of course, are biological agents. I like here, I'm drinking this water, right?
Hmm.
Um, but we're not just that. And so there's a small minority of organisms who are able to extend their agency into new possibilities because of narrative. They can extend it horizontally, um, like Michael Levin's notion of a light cone. So your dog is more intelligent than a frog because you can tell that that your dog can anticipate more of the world,
Hmm.
right? And so that your dog has something that's allowing it to do that. We have episodic memory. I think dogs do too, to some degree. So we can extend, but we have narrative, right? So we can do bizarre things like pick up a photograph of here's this 3-year-old kid, and you go, there I am, right? So we become temporally extended through a narrative, and we are also vertically extended. We can take perspectives on our perspective taking.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means we are selves that exist in stories, not just organisms in niches. But we are so, and there are other selves. I'm convinced of this because there's lots of organisms that pass the self test and have an amazing cognitive light code, like elephants and chimpanzees and certain kinds of like crows and ravens and things, like probably octopus. Not sure about that yet. But then we do something that none of those creatures do. We make promises.
Mm-hmm.
So we enter into normative possibility. We want to make promises, and we feel bound. We have a greater sensitivity to that vertical dimension than other organisms do. And that's probably because of language. But that allows us to have normative possibilities, narrative possibilities, not just nomological possibilities. So agents need law-like relations,
Mm-hmm.
nomological. Selves need narrative possibilities, and persons need normative possibilities. So our possibility space is vast.
Wow. No, that's excellent. Yeah. The animal that makes promises, I've also used the term, which is probably closely allied to promises, the animal that makes agreements.
Sure.
That seems
Yeah.
to be very, and it's key to literacy, to numeracy, to money. All of these things are all agreements, basically, right? It's like when I say this word, we're agreeing that you will understand
Yeah.
roughly what
Yeah.
I
I
meant when I
agree.
said it. Yeah.
I think promise is dependent on normativity interacting with the way selves can mutually recognize each other.
Mm-hmm.
This is sort of Hegel's point. Uh, um, so we're always at that level making agreements. You and I are agreeing on the meaning of terms right now.
Mm-hmm.
But notice what we do. We renegotiate it. I would say,
Yeah.
well, I'm worried about this word, the way you're using it. And you recognize me as having a legitimate right to make that claim on you. And then
Yeah.
I have to recognize that I can't just impose it on you. You are allowed to, well, as you said, you can agree. And what your agreement is basically, I promise from now on that I'm going to start using the term this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so promises, mutual recognition, agreement, these are all interdefining terms.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Hoppe talks about this as like argumentation ethics, that we're engaged in the market process right now, right? Like
Yes.
I'm consensually saying things, and then I have to presuppose that you too are a conscious actor capable of interpreting these things, generating your own thoughts, opinions, etc., to have an actual exchange.
Well,
If,
this is
otherwise, it's not a conversation.
That's right. This is Grice's work. This is one of the two founding theories of linguistic pragmatics. Is speech act theory from Austin and Searle, and Grice's conversational implicature and his maxims. And so these are things like, um, I assume you're trying to be truthful, that you're putting things in the most relevant fashion, etc. By the way, Spurburn, Wilson, and myself, we all argue that all the maxims just collapse into, I believe I have to assume you're trying to be cooperative with me by doing relevance realization with me.
Interesting. Okay.
Because when I say things, you can't derive all the possible logical implications. I have to
Right.
rely that you will find the ones relevant that I need you to find relevant so that you can understand what I'm finding relevant.
Yeah, I loved your example of stopping.
Yeah.
You pull up in a car and you say, "Excuse me, I'm almost out of gas," and
Yeah.
then all of the implications behind
Yeah.
that. It's like,
Yeah.
well, excuse me, I'm not taking up too much of your time. I'm almost out of gas. It doesn't mean I want you to pour gas in my car. It's like point me to a gas station.
Yeah.
So we always are saying so much more than we actually say.
Yeah. We're conveying more than we say, always.
Conveying more than we say, which might be another perspective on actions speaking louder than words. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because I want to come back to that.
Well, I'll just put a pin in it. Your theory and the way you're getting at action is basically the action of conveyance takes precedence over the action of speech. They're not
Yes.
two separate acts, but you're conveying, and the conveying is always much more than what you're saying. Yes.
Yes. Exactly. Okay, to just introduce here the axiom of action from Mises, because this is important to the rest of the conversation. Again, the axiom is humans act, which by which he means we use objectively available means to pursue subjectively selected ends, which in so few words you could say action is goal-directed behavior.
Well, I would say it in even fewer words. Action is problem solving.
Problem solving. Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, because a
Because,
problem entails a goal, right?
but it also entail, because if, look, here's why I want to be, this sounds technical, but this is like, you know, uh, um, this is the work from Simon and you know, the general problem solver and things like that. Null and Simon. If I have my goal, I don't have a problem. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and that means I'm not doing anything. I
Mm-hmm.
want to, like, my goal is to be in a chair.
Done.
Okay. So there has to be space. This is why anticipation and foresight, like we were talking about, is so
Yeah.
central to intelligence. There has to be a space between my goal and me. And then there is some challenge to crossing that space. And that's what I think action is, or as predictive processing would say, that's where active inference is. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that so Mises says you have to have felt uneasiness is the term he
That's
uses.
exactly it. So that that
Yeah.
is the disc, that is the space, the gap, the longing between your goal and where you are. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So this comes from a different thinker. It's a student of Mises, Hans Hermann Hoppe, and he has this great book, Economic Science and the Austrian Method. Very short book, but very dense, profound. And he just has this casual line on page 20 that I really thought just hit me like a philosophical lightning bolt, and is what put me. I was already on this path, but now like the connection between praxeology and all these paradoxical first principles like became pretty apparent. And I'll paraphrase. He says something like, "It is only through action that mind and reality can come into contact." And I think I've shared this with you before. You brought up contact epistemology and how
Yep. Very
sensitive,
much.
the word contact is useful there. So, but the takeaway for me there was like, oh my goodness, there it is. Action is the unity prior to subject object, right? It's if mind and world can only fit together in action, then action is that prior unity. And so, I guess what's the question here? Is there any more? This is why I think it's so axiomatic. And then we'll go into performative contradiction as well. Like to try
Sure.
and refute the axiom of action is itself an act, right?
Yeah.
You have a goal of refutation, and you're
Mhm.
using the means of words, etc.
That's a Greek argument. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Very ancient argument. Doesn't mean it's a bad argument. In fact, it means exactly the opposite.
yeah.
The argument has tremendous staying power. Yes, I
So
agree with that.
my question would be: is there any more certain knowledge other than we ourselves, everywhere and always, exist on a path of goal-directed behavior?
Okay, so let me.
It's almost like to be alive is to be in the act of
I think.
problem solving.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I think that auto and other people make this argument, so I'm just going to gesture to this. Autopoiesis depends on adaptivity. If the
Mm.
environment is in any way unstable or dynamic, to be autopoietic means I have to adapt. I have to change. So my making myself is also changing myself so that I continue to be able to make myself.
Right.
Right. And so you get into adaptivity. And as soon as you're doing that, you're then saying, I'm a seeking being. So the difference between me and a fire is self-organizing, but it doesn't self-organize to seek out those conditions that produce and protect its existence. It will burn
Right.
itself out, right? And so we are inherently seeking. I think anything that's alive is a seeking thing, and Panskep and others argue that sort of the core motivational state is the seeking state. Now, um, we can talk about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, because certain religions say, well, like maybe you there's a way in which certain things you can't seek for. We can come back to that. But I wanted to ask you a question about this seeking and the contact epistemology, because I like what was it Hop you said? Is that right?
Hoppe.
Hoppa.
Hoppe.
Yeah. Hoppe is
Hoppe.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hoppa. See, and I think you're right. I think he's using the word contact and it has tact in it, which is tactile touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But here's what I want to bring in, like uh, the work on contact epistemology, the work by Merleau-Ponty and others, and which is integral to embodiment. So let's look at this very carefully. Remember, I talked about the two senses of realness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Confirming and surprise. So whenever I'm touching, I'm always being touched.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever that's why we touch is the sense in which realizing and being realized are always co-present. The two senses of realness are always co-present and constraining and affecting each other. That's why we use contact metaphors for our most, listen to this word, intimate relationship to
Mm-hmm.
reality. When we're getting closer to, right? And are you in touch with reality, right?
Optimal grip and such.
Yeah, all of it, exactly. So this is not a challenge. This is a question, because when Hoppe is talking about action, when you're talking about action, I think of it as, well. Oh no, let me turn it around. This is what I concern what people might hear. You might hear like an Aristotelian notion where you have an agent doing something, and that's what an action is. But for me, for example, the action of intelligence is as much changing the world as being changed by the world. The
Yes.
arrow goes both ways, because if it doesn't go both ways, it's not actually transjective. I'm realizing, but I'm being realized. I'm touching, but I'm being touched.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because this is not necessarily part of the word action, but many people, when they hear action, they equate it to like expression, the way I am imposing my will on the world. And I don't think he or you can be meaning that if we're talking about this fundamental contact, transjectivity, etc. It's got to be that I'm realizing and being realized. I'm touching and being touched.
Yes. No, I think you're spot on. A few things that came up for me there. Is it Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? It says like the act of observation
Yep.
changes that which
Yep.
we
Yep.
observe,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
like that is seems to be a very fundamental reality. I also don't think you could even have that monistic view where I'm just imposing my will on the world. You couldn't do that and be an effective problem solver, because it
Well,
almost presumes like there's no constraints, there's no pushback from the world.
but this is exactly it, and this goes to something I know you've heard me said, but I want to show you how this is actually being painted quite wonderfully in your philosophy, which is you are simultaneously rejecting empiricism and romanticism. You're
Mm,
rejecting empiricism, that we're a blank slate that the world writes upon, and you're rejecting at least decadent forms of romanticism that says no, the world is an empty canvas that I paint my subjectivity, that I project myself onto. You're rejecting both of those, I think, in a deep and fundamental way.
yeah, I think so. I didn't. I don't know if I shared this one with you or not, but I went through. I forget which podcast you were doing, talking about the post Enlightenment gap, all the
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
dichotomies. Fact,
Yep.
value, theory, data,
Yep.
is, ought,
Yeah.
and I was just going through, which I could share later, and writing how it seems to me like action reconciles all of those dichotomies, just like it
Yeah.
does subject object. It does for those as well. So I guess in that reconciliation, I would be rejecting sort of like a classical empiricism and a decadent romanticism.
Yeah. I think you have to, is what I'm arguing.
And that, well, I mean, maybe stands to reason too, because Mises's axiom of action it comes from rationalism, right? That he's actually coming up with this axiom that you can't refute. And then he's deducing praxeology and economics from that. Okay. So I don't know if we got a final, but like, it's seems pretty unshakably certain that we are engaged in goal-directed behavior.
Well, it depends what you mean by certain. Sorry, I keep doing this.
Okay. Yes.
Because I want to make a distinction between a foundation and a primordial presupposition.
Oh, yes,
Because a
please.
foundation says there's no way this can be wrong, and all right, whereas a presupposition says this could be wrong, or the interpretation I'm giving of it could be wrong, but I
Mhm.
have to rely on this when in any act of correction that
Got it.
I'm making. And the reason why I don't like foundationalism is because foundationalism, it gets you into a tremendous self-contradiction. This is
Mm.
and others. Okay, so what's a foundation? It's either uh, it's some version of a logical identity, and therefore it can't be doubted, or it's self-evident because it's part of my current experience. So it's either self-evident or a tautology, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you get, okay, now the statement that foundationalism is true, is that a tautology? Nope. Is it a self-evident truth? Nope. So it doesn't actually ground itself. You see what happened?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think that's the deep reason why all the attempts to create foundationalist epistemologies have collapsed. Um,
Okay.
so let me try one thing. For example, let's say that Mises is right and he's got a formal system. You still face the fact, Gödel, that formal system can't be simultaneously consistent and complete. There are
Mhm.
truths that cannot be generated by that formal system. So to the degree to which it's incomplete, it is uncertain, and therefore it can't give you even the axiom. So it has a degree of uncertainty to it. Did that track as an argument for you?
I didn't follow how the axiom has the degree of uncertainty.
Okay, so everything follows from the axioms in a formal system. Is
Yep.
that okay?
Correct. Yeah. The
Right.
axiom of action in the case
Yeah,
of praxeology. Yeah.
and you derive everything from that. So that makes it a formal system. Gödel logically proved that there
Yeah.
are truths that are not available, that are non-derivable from your axioms. Is that
Yes.
you agree
Yeah.
with that? Which means there is uncertainty in my axiom because it cannot account for all
Mm,
truths. Do you see that?
I see. Okay. Well, then maybe this is something else I feel like as I've started to internalize the axiom of action, which, it's pretty obvious by now, like I'm looking at that as this paradoxical, ineffable first principle
Yeah,
action as
yes,
such.
yes,
It's putting me more into a position of epistemic humility. It's like really like we just
yeah,
can't know, like so
yeah,
Gödel's right. And Mises would agree, by the way. He would say, yes, the axiom of action is axiomatic because it's irrefutable. It's, protected by performative contradiction, basically. But that
and
doesn't mean you can predict what prices are going to do or what the stock market's going to do. Like all of that is still unpredictable. There's all
yeah,
kinds of
I
uncertainty.
think that's right. And uh, so there, I that's why I don't like to use the word certainty. I like to use the word certainty for the right.
Inside a formal system, basically.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
only when you're inside a formal system can you talk about certainty. But if we give that previous argument, all formal systems are small world and the real world is a large world,
Yeah.
right? That then you've got to and humility humility is to remember that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not here but here.
Yeah.
It's to remember that however much your small world is working for you and however much you love it and identify with it, it is only it is necessarily not the large world, and it is necessarily the case that there are other small worlds that are equally logically valid. That's Reichenbach's proof,
Yeah.
right? And so that that's Socratic humility. That's Socratic humility. I think
The
that's
map
right.
is not the territory.
The map's not the territory. Now a globe is better than a map, though, right? And
Yeah.
so like it doesn't
Depending on
mean
your
that
aim.
yes, 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 that's true. That's true. That's right. But yeah, because you don't want to carry when you're camping, you don't want to carry a
Yeah.
globe around.
Yeah.
That's true. But what I meant is, but like I was trying to show that we're not saying that all positions are equal because of this.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
Now, I think what you've got with your axiom is I would call it you're basically so for me when you say well you get into a performative contradiction that goes back to what I was saying about right a primordial presupposition
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm hearing you, then you would consider the axiom of action to be more in that category of
Yes, yes,
primordial presupposition. Okay. Fair enough. And if we're not going to use the word certainty, what, like incontrovertibility, what would be the right?
Well,
If you
I don't know if we have a word for it because, but your phrase captures it. The violation of it would be performative contradiction.
right, okay. All right. Well, that takes me to my next point, which is on performative contradiction itself. And I've found myself really thinking about this a lot
Good.
because one of the most.
By the way, I'm really impressed by the depth and extent of your thought on all of this.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, you have been a wonderful teacher and, like I said, a great gateway drug to many other teachers and books. So it's, uh, if I would be grateful to you, sir. So thank you for all of that. But this, okay, this is one I'll just read some of this to you and I'll let you
Yep.
respond.
Yep. So
So
I'm not being rude. I might be noting things down when you're
please go ahead. We've already touched on some of this, so some of it might be repetitive, but nonetheless, a simple performative contradiction would be, I am not speaking,
Yes.
right?
That's it.
Obviously, I am speaking. So, despite the content of what I'm saying, my performance speaks louder, quote
Yeah.
unquote, speaks louder than the content of my words.
Indeed, as we used to say.
Indeed. Yes. In action, right?
Yeah. Yep.
In day, I think is what it comes from. So, another basically the performance falsifies the content, right? Or speaks
Yep.
louder than the content,
Undermines it. Yeah.
undermines it. Yep. That's the structure that the axiom of action is using, right? To deny it, you must do something, which is to form an intention, choose words, try to
And
persuade.
I think that's excellent. I think that means a primordial presupposition is that we are acting. Yes.
Yes, yes. And so the denial itself is purposeful behavior, is
That's right.
action.
That's right.
Therefore,
And it's oriented
it's
towards a norm, and we're correcting ourselves because we're trying to get to that norm. We're trying to speak the truth, all
yes.
that sort of stuff. Yes, I agree.
Yes. And then if we try to say humans don't act is like trying to prove I'm not speaking, basically.
Yeah.
Right. The performance is presupposing what it denies.
Yes, that's right.
So the axiom, this is where it kind of gets a little interesting, is not actually established by observation.
No.
It's established by the impossibility of coherently rejecting it without affirming it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what a presupposition is.
Okay.
Presupposition is not, I mean, this ultimately goes back to Kant, although I'm deeply influenced by Whitehead, who made very clear and explicit the notion of performative contradiction. And I also agree with Whitehead that performative contradictions are more important than propositional contradictions. Propositional contradictions are
Yes.
important, but performative contradictions are more important.
Is that because, okay, so the
Yeah,
propositional contradictions are inside the well-defined small network space, as
yeah,
you were describing, but the performative gets
that's right.
outside of it, right?
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
this is like the work that I was doing all the way back when I started teaching Introduction to Cognitive Science, and that Evan and Frank and Gleiser have in the recent book, The Blind Spot. So
Oh
here's
yeah, I read that too. Great book.
yeah. So
Yeah.
here's an example of a more subtle performative contradiction that really matters, which is somebody would say, "Well, the only thing that's real are the quantum, right?
Oh yeah.
Quarks. That's the only thing that's real." And it's like, okay, that means the place in which you're standing and the rationality and the theorizing and the mathematical measurement, which you can't do at the quantum level, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, right?
Hmm.
All of that is unreal, and yet you're concluding from this unreality what is most real. That's a performative contradiction. That's what they call a blind
Right.
spot. You're proposing an ontology that undermines the performance that is necessary to propose the ontology.
Yeah, sawing off the branch on which you rest, as
Right.
they
So
say.
for me, instead of doing certainty like I do, like when I'm talking about primordial presuppositions, that they get you into performative contradictions, and a nice way of thinking about performative contradictions is you get into these blind spots.
Hmm. That's excellent. And, I will definitely take that language into my thinking and writing on this. So here's where something I've been wrestling with. It's like, okay, we know the saying actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
We also know that there is this part there's a component of the performative contradiction, namely the performance,
Yeah.
that always speaks louder than the words or
Yes.
the content. And so, in trying, it seems to me like if those things are true, then action as such is something that cannot be fully contained in words, right? Like to speak, words are a means to an end. So they're like a subspecies of
Yeah.
action, basically.
And sorry, I want to phrase this carefully because I care about you, and I'm trying to say something that's a compliment and not condescending. But when you made that move, I said, "Oh, this is a more abstract and ontologically way of talking about what I talk about with the non-propositional kinds of knowing.
Yes.
There are ways of knowing the world that we can't capture in our linguistic propositional performance. We have to do it in our skilled behavior, in the states of mind we enter into, and the perspectives that they generate, and the participatory ways in which uh, I or you and the world participate in the same principles until we couple
Yes.
together. We belong together. And the reason why performative contradiction matters more is performative contradiction takes you to the non-propositional knowing.
Right.
And the non-propositional knowing is the knowing that gives you the standing and orientation and the foregrounding and backgrounding perspective taking that allows you to make any propositional statements.
Yes. No, that's excellent. As usual, you're forerunning me. I mean, that's a place exactly where I wanted to go. Not yet though, but we'll get there. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Onramp is pioneering a new model, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure and adds fault tolerance to your setup. With Onramp's multi-institution custody, your funds are auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only be moved with your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody simplifies private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Onramp also helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, loans, and more, all without compromising on accessibility. So schedule a consultation with the Onramp team today to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. So let me just read this last portion then. So the reason that actions speak louder than words, it seems to be like ineffable and or paradoxical in a way because, well, as you said earlier, speech is an action.
Yep.
So, a speech act is an action, but it's not, also thinking is an action. Meditating is an action, actually in the libertarian tradition, inaction is an action. If I choose not to do something, that's still, I'm choosing that at the exclusion of other things.
And that's where I was talking earlier about, like, action can be in contradiction to reception. And if you do that, then you've lost transjectivity. And I hear you trying to use action deeper because you also use interaction interchangeably with it. And interaction means I'm not only pressing on the world,
yes,
pressing on me, right? That's why it's interaction.
Yes.
And I think if we were being finicky, and you don't have to be, but I would say that your principle is actually that interaction is at the base.
That's a good one, actually. So, well,
Because the brain
action.
relies on excitation and inhibition,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Well, it almost sounds like relationality to me. That
And I don't
you're.
have any problem with that. But you know
Yeah.
what? If you do the reason why I like it, so let's go back, and I've done this with James to his face, so I'm not talking
Mhm.
behind his back, right? I agree with him. His critique of substance ontology and is right, and it's
Mhm.
superseded by relationality because you can't get relations from a ladder. But I've
Mhm.
said to James, yes, but you also can't derive drive relata from relations for me,
Right.
and you can't do it. And if there are like what makes one relation different from another other than the relata then that are in it, so
Yeah.
you need again
It's
something that's
both.
deeper that both relations and relata. And this is what I'm trying to get at, that this notion of interaction or communing. The reason I use communing is I'm trying to pick up on this analogy for people. There are no communities without people, but there are no people without communities. Like
Yes.
they coexist, co-evolve together. And that's what I think we're talking about here. uh, and communing is a kind of interaction.
Mhm.
Communication is a
Mhm.
kind of interaction. That's why I'm making the proposal to you.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to propose here is something similar to what you said about relevance earlier, that it's impossible to give a formal definition for it. And I think that might also be true for action, because a formal definition is an action in a way. So,
Right. I don't disagree with that, but what I'm saying is, like, I think we're bumping into that. Like when you say stuff like inaction is also an action,
yeah.
that's getting problematic. And I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to point to something that can be both change and being changed,
Yeah.
because a
Well,
real anything that's real not only changes but is changeable.
yeah. So, yeah, I could pick a different word. This is, I don't know where I picked that up, but like what I'm trying to say, I'll choose a different word. Idleness is an action, right? Like you're choosing to sit still and sit on your hands and not do anything, rather than go out and go to the grocery store or do this or do that. So like the goal directed behavior can manifest as something that appears inert and
So,
inactive.
so yeah. So let me make sure that so I agree with that, and you agree with what I said, and let's make sure that
Yeah.
sounds like we're trying to get the semantics clear, which is not a useless thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, so what you're trying to say is um, everything that a person does is always goal directed in some fashion.
The
Is that
only yes, the only exception that Mises makes is he contrasts goal directed behavior or action with reflexive behavior. So the beating of your heart, the
yeah, that's why I don't think that's where there's no agency. That's I already
that's right.
proposed this to you. There's
Yeah.
no action.
Yes.
So but I so as long as you okay, so maybe this is a way. There's a distinction between instrumental and intrinsic action. I want to propose to you then.
Okay.
In instrumental action, I'm acting. The process is for the sake of the goal. When I'm doing something intrinsic, I will set up goals, but for the sake of engaging in the process.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the having and the being mode, and you can tell the difference between whether or not you like a shortcut. So, for example, I do my taxes because if I don't, the government comes and gets me. But if somebody could give me a shortcut around that, I'll take it like that. When I'm
Yep.
making love to somebody, I don't want to shortcut that.
Right.
right,
Right.
right, right, right. Okay.
Well, yeah. One's based in love and one's based in fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, this is what I mean when I say all autopoetic things are problem solving. But what I'm the reason I and maybe this is just semantic nibbling. But many people hear action as only how I'm changing things, whereas
Yeah, I'm good with interaction, if that term, because I
that
can't even
term
imagine an action that's not an interaction the way that I'm.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I'm hearing you saying.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it is true, and again, that many people will use the word action and not mean interaction.
Yes. Well, I'm totally fine with that word because I can't imagine an action that's not relational. So therefore the inter seems like
It seems like it's
the
actually clarifying the commitment to transjectivity. That's what
yeah,
I'm putting my finger on. Yeah.
I agree with this. I think we just have to come to an agreement on the semantics, but yes, I agree with that. You cited this concern much earlier though, that, hydrogen and oxygen can have an interaction and become water, but that doesn't mean
That-
hydrogen and oxygen are,
excellent comeback. The problem with that is we have terms that are making separate distinctions, and we need
yeah,
to make distinctions simultaneously, and we don't have a term for that.
yeah. Which, by the way, to Persig again, he takes it the other way. He says that, he thinks hydrogen and oxygen have a preference for one another, and that's why they become water. So he takes it down into the inorganic, but
Yeah, and
that has its
there's
own problems.
well, I mean, there's continuity between autopoiesis and self-organization, but as I often say to Michael Levin, differences of degree have to become difference of kind, or you fall
Right.
into Sorites paradoxes. I can
Yes.
move one grain of sand from a heap, and it doesn't change it into not being a heap. So I can take away all the grains one by one, and there's no sand left, but I
Yeah.
still have a heap. And so differences of degree have to become differences of kind.
I think that's related to the relata and relations as well,
Yeah,
right?
it
The
is. It is.
degrees are the relations and the
Yeah.
kind are the
Yeah.
relata. It also, yeah, it's related. There's a great book, Dawkins. I know he's great, actually, his old writing. Or book, River Out of Eden. He talks about the difference between analog and digital
Yeah.
and how, analog is that continuous difference in
That's right.
kind, relational, and then digital is more about the kind.
Yeah.
Difference in kind, rather. So, anyways, I'm going to just, what I'm wrestling with here is like that. We'll go with interaction as our term, but interaction as such. So not the category, not the term that I can describe, but that part of the performative contradiction that speaks loudest.
Well, let me ask you then, because now I'm happy. I share your agreement. I'm totally on board with your agreement, and I'm understanding how you're trying to use the term. And I want to say, because action is related to actuality,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to say reality is both actuality and potentiality, and the relation between them, and the relation between them, the basho between
Mm-hmm.
actuality and potentiality, which comes up in information, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the potentiality, all the potential alternatives, and then here's the actuality, and that's how I have information. It's the relationship between actuality and potentiality,
Yep.
right? And I want to say that's where the reality is. And you're meaning all of that, I take it, with the way you're using interaction. Is that correct?
So I told you we're writing a book about this. We've wrestled with this a lot, right? That act and potency, I think, were the terms Aristotle used.
Yeah, and then Aquinas flips them, right? Well, he does and he doesn't. Many people don't see this. So it's pure act.
Mm-hmm.
It is, except God's pure act is actually a potential that particular forms have to actualize into particular things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both the most real act and the most real possibilizing at the same time.
That's where I was going to go with it. And my co-author and I are still going circles about this. So I don't, it's not conclusive, but
Yeah.
I interpreted potency as possibility.
Yes, you should.
And possibility as basically like the meta affordance, right? Because all affordances are possibilities for real action. So then I came to see potency or possibility as a subspecies of interaction, to use our term.
Yes.
And so, I don't know. I think that reality as it is accessible to us is just the interaction. Like we can perceive possibility or we can project possibility and think about it. We can create tools that change the possibility space. We can fly from New York to LA and we couldn't do that 300 years ago or whatever the thing may be. But it is only the goal-directed behavior that puts us in touch with that reality. So like, even if there is more, the other example I gave was like the Big Bang. Right. Like, clearly the Big Bang, when you say everything like grounds out in human interaction, But what about the Big Bang? That happened
Yeah.
15 billion years ago. Obviously,
Yeah.
there were no humans
Exactly.
around. What are you talking about? But what is the Big Bang actually? It's just a model. We inferred and created a model that makes a lot of sense and maps backwards is quote unquote proven or highly plausible, whatever you want to call it. But it originates from human goal directed behavior.
It doesn't originate. The theory originates from human
The
goal-directed
theory.
behavior.
Okay, fair enough.
The
That's
Big
I should
Bang doesn't
clarify that.
originate from that, because then you'd end up being a performative contradiction.
Right.
You'd be saying the Big Bang theory existed before my theorizing, but it only exists because of my theorizing.
Maybe I'm a Kantian then. That like I think that we can only
Then we
get.
can have a deeper argument.
Well, I may not understand him fully either, but my rough understanding was that the noumena, like the thing
Yeah.
as is, reality as such, is inaccessible to us. That we can really only have
Yeah,
perception,
and the
theory,
problem,
etc.
and then if you go into Kant, you have this problem, which is if it's inaccessible, we have no reason for believing it's there. And then you get Hegel. We can
Mm,
only know that there's a limit if we can actually transcend it. That's Schlegel, right? And
mm,
Harman, right? Like, yeah, you got rid of God and you got rid of the world, but you also get rid of other people, even including earlier versions of yourself, so that you get reduced. The only thing that really exists is this momentary blip of consciousness.
hmm. What about Nishida? Okay, let me read this, and then I want to ask about Nishida. So the moment back to performative contradiction. Right. It feels ineffable and paradoxical because the action as such is the condition for making anything explicit. The
That's right.
moment you try to describe it, you turn it into the thing talked about, but the action is not primarily a thing that can be talked about. It's the ongoing enactment by which subjects and objects, meanings and facts, even descriptions themselves show up. It's paradoxical in the same way the eye can't directly see itself seeing.
That's
You can
right.
model action, you can narrate action, you can analyze action, but all of that is to engage in action. So, or interaction, sorry to use our
Yeah.
new
No,
term
that's
I'm reading here.
understandable. Yeah.
So, interaction is both utterly obvious, you're doing it right now,
Yep.
and strangely elusive because
That's
you
right.
can't step
Like
outside of it
being.
or
And that's what,
capture it like being,
yeah. Yeah.
which is why it quote unquote speaks louder than words while never literally speaking at all.
That's right.
Therefore, action as such is both ineffable and paradoxical, very much like the one of Neoplatonism.
I don't have any disagreement with that. Um, I was, um, I think Neoplatonism is the only real alternative to Kant,
Mm,
because you have to, let's quickly, what's Kant's problem? Why does math work? Why does it
yeah.
describe reality?
Yeah.
Right. So there's two possible answers. The, and what you say, well, what's the problem? Because I couldn't possibly have learned math from reality.
Right.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's like, because it's necessary and it's perfect, like a perfect circle and all that. And so Kant's argument idea is, well, what we do is we project on to reality in order to make sense of things. Plato says, no, reality has a real structure to it, that is ultimately goes beyond what we can gather by our senses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Neoplatonic solution. Why? What do I think is wrong with the Kantian position? The Kantian position is it creates a really radical dualism, because, so let's say this act of imposing math on the world is, we'll call it projection, which people frequently do. Now this is where Schelling was so powerful. He said, but the act of projecting can't itself be a projection. It has
Mm,
to really exist. And the mind, and this is Berman, the mind has to really know, right, these things. They're not, or else you get an infinite regress. And then you get the question, but if the mind can directly know something, why can't it directly know the world?
mm-hmm.
Another Kantian critique. Um, and so for me, I wouldn't, I mean, I've given you sort of 4 or 5 reasons why I don't think, I mean, everything I'm saying is controversial, but I gave you 4 or 5 arguments why I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the Kantian alternative works. And the reason I like the Kantian alternative is because it is the grandfather of all of the dichotomies that we
Mm.
have been attacking and critiquing and trying to liberate our if the doors of perception were cleansed, then the band would be as they truly are, infinite, right? And we're trying to
Yeah.
do that. Um,
And one of
and
my favorite bands too.
I know, yeah. One of my favorite poets and one of my yeah. I mean, I went through a whole Doors period in
Yeah.
my life. Dark and murky band. Yeah,
Okay, no, that all it I mean, again, it just feels like that's why I was going to go to Nishida next, because you do hit this ground of absolute nothingness, and like it's all paradoxical, and no matter
yeah.
what you say, you're wrong, right? It's like, well,
That's
it's
right.
either this or it's that, but it's not. And I don't know. Like for me, just going back to the map territory metaphor, it's like the map runs out. You hit the boundary of paradox. It doesn't mean paradox is like wrong.
But
It just means
this is Priest's argument in thought beyond words, and he says all paradox. Well, he makes an argument that a lot of paradoxes, perhaps he's even saying all, are based on the boundary paradox, which
mm,
is the boundary part of the system it bounds. Because if you say yes, you're in trouble, and if you say no, you're in trouble.
that's so interesting. I intuited the same thing. I was calling it like the boundary of the map. It's like,
Yeah,
well, what is
that's
that?
right.
It's where the map converts into the territory,
Yeah,
but it's also not.
yeah.
It's just it's a frame problem.
Yes, it is. It's the frame problem, and to use another instance of it, there is always a fundamental framing that is not present in
Right.
any frame and not captured by any frame, and
Yes.
making that frame possible. Yes, I agree with that.
And that's, I think, the connection between the Mises, his axiom of action, and the one. It's like it's not any particular frame, but it's the act of framing itself.
Yeah,
You
or
know, it's
and so, but
no concept, but it's the process that makes all concepts possible. Something like that.
so it's so let's play with this. And so now I'm saying things, and we're trying them out together, because you referenced Nishida and Nishitani. Yeah, I think it is the through line for all framing, but it's also the place that the through lines.
Mm-hmm.
So William Desmond makes a distinction between the conatus ascendi, the ultimate conatus of reality, and the passio ascendi, the like the womb of reality that gives birth. Um, and you can see both of these being talked about in like in Taoism and things like that. So yeah, I think there is an there is an there's a through line, which is not an essence going through the frames, because if they have the same essence, they would be the same frame. They would be essentially the same frame, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to have frames that are essentially different from each other.
Yep.
So the through line, and the through line is not itself any frame. It's not any, and it's taking place in something that's not any kind of frame. So the way the Neoplatonists do this is you have the one, that's like the basho,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the through lining, that's the noose, and then you have all the particular frames, right? And that's the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And you have all the things occurring in it. That's what I just said was terrifically controversial. There are many Neoplatonists, John, slow down, but that's what I'm saying is I think Neoplatonism, other worldviews do as well, but it's trying to say, okay, the basho, like the basho of the color system, that's no color, right? That's the one. The through line is what's called the noose. It's the holographic interpenetration of all the forms,
Mm-hmm.
and each particular framing is like what the form is, each particular eidos.
Wow. Yeah, it's
Sorry,
fantastically.
maybe
No,
that's
no, no,
irrelevant.
no, no, no. It's not irrelevant. It's just, the other thing I've picked up recently is this, and probably from your work or someone on your show, I don't recall. Someone said something like the mystical is like an admission of epistemic humility as well. It's like there's just you just hit this, you hit the boundary as we were just talking about, and then there's a whole lot. Like most of everything is beyond the boundary.
Yes.
And we use mystical language to sort of gesture to what's beyond the boundary, but it doesn't capture what's
So
beyond the boundary.
I think part of that is like this. Let's say, instead of using the word boundary, let's use the word horizon,
Mm-hmm.
because the horizon moves as you move, and you
Mm-hmm.
can never move beyond the horizon. But as you move, right,
Yeah.
ground is disclosed that you previously were unaware of. And so this is what I mean when I talk about, like, you're in a frame and you go to a more encompassing frame and the more encompassing frame. And then what you realize, the through line between all that transframing is pointing to something
Mm-hmm.
beyond all the frames, right? And that's like, I can never get past the horizon, but I can constantly transframe, and that discloses more reality. That, by the way, is one of the deeper arguments behind why pilgrimage is so important.
Theoria.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Amazing. So Mises's view is something like, with primordial presupposition
Yep.
that you yourself act, right? Through
Yes.
self-reflection, basically, because
Well said.
yeah, your awareness of choosing ends and using means is not inferred from observation from the external world, but it's actually what you are doing all the time, like your own intrinsic purposiveness, if you will. And others, we just see bodily movements, basically. But Mises and other praxeologists also argue that treating other humans as if they act is a necessary presupposition for making sense of language, cooperation, conflict, exchange, promises, institutions, and history broadly.
I agree with that.
If you were like, no, humans are not goal directed actors, then you'd reduce social life to mere physiology and motion, just bodies moving, basically.
You couldn't even do that, I would argue, because you couldn't rely on other people's ability to check your biases. You couldn't do science. You
Right.
couldn't make use of language. You're into an absolute solipsistic skepticism.
Yes. And so even the categories that we use, reason, intention, responsibility, agreement, deception, trade, law, these would all stop being intelligible, basically,
That's right.
if people were not goal directed actors. So self reflection is what grounds the axiom in the first person, but practical intelligibility and social interpretation extend it to others as the only coherent framework for understanding how humans move through the world.
Now, can I intervene at that point?
Yes.
I don't think those. I think there's a hidden dichotomy in there that I
Mm.
would want to press, which is, and this is Wittgenstein. Those two are not separable. Your capacity. Okay, for example, let's just do it developmentally. I have self awareness. If you ask a 3.5-year-old what's going on in their head, they'll tell you blood. They can't introspect yet. How do we get introspection? Well, what happens is I, as a young child, imitate somebody taking a perspective on me.
Right.
And I imitate it to the point where I can do that without them being around. And then that's called internalization. And then I can just do that on myself. I
Mm-hmm.
can take a perspective on my perspective taking. Same thing with my language use. This is Wittgenstein's. There is no private language because language depends on meaning, and meaning has to be shareable, which means it has to be mutually correctable. So to the degree to which you are reflecting on yourself and describing yourself, the inner world and the social world are completely interpenetrating each other.
I see. So even the self-reflection itself depended on a social context originally.
That's totally right, and that's part
Wow,
of
that's great.
the postmodern critique. Unlike Jordan Peterson, I think there are good arguments that postmodernists make.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the postmodern critique of modernity. It's because what you're secretly doing, and I think this matters to you given your previous argument, you're secretly reintroducing the subjective objective dichotomy back into the picture here by saying self-reflection inside subjective and out here the objective. And what we've been arguing throughout is no, that's not where the fundamental reality is.
Interesting. Is that an argument for the? Actually, I don't want to ask it. I was going to go back to relations relata, but I don't think it works. It's you're just basically saying that the self reflection emerges from the relations with others in like a developmental sense.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
not only in a developmental sense, that was the first point,
Mhm.
but also in an ontological sense, because to the degree to which my experience is meaningful is the degree to which it is communicable. And
Right.
well, I communicate with myself. That's only after you've learned language,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like, and so you have to rely. Okay, well, what does it mean to communicate? It means that I'm touching and being touched. That I'm right?
Right.
And so, sorry, Robert, I want to go on a little bit about this because
Yeah.
this is part of my. Arjun, a student of mine, we published a video essay on work we're doing on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Meaning in life is not a private possession. It's normative, it's shareable, it's mutually correctable, and we have an incorrect model when we're talking about what makes my life meaningful, because we don't ask, like in the questionnaires, well, how much can you communicate and share that meaning with others?
Mm-hmm.
How much do they help you to correct your meaning in life? Like, sorry, there's a whole video essay, and if your listeners want to, they can go into
It's
that
really
argument.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm pressing on this. I'm saying, insofar as you accept that argument, and not even below propositional meaning, even meaning in life, the meaning of being connected to
Mm-hmm.
reality, you can't you can't you can't accept the subject object dichotomy, subjective objective dichotomy, and have real meaning.
Mm. Wow. Interesting. That's an excellent video essay. I listened to it twice. I
Thank you.
also really appreciated the whole meaning in life. I think it was from the meaning in life literature, right? It's like
Yep.
what is something you want to exist even if you don't? How much do you
Yeah.
matter to it? Maybe there's one other question.
That was my take on it. And now I add two more. How reasonable you are in self-correcting your connection, and
Mm,
how shareable is it with other people?
yeah, it's really good words to guide life for sure.
All right, all right,
All right, I'll read this second piece here. Now, this is not Mises or praxeologist. This is a bit of my own extension.
good.
Um, so the very use of words already implies action or
Yes.
interaction
Yeah.
on part of the speaker and an interpretive action on the part of the listener, because
Yep.
speaking is not a neutral emission of sounds. It is purposeful behavior aimed at an end, namely being understood, persuading, informing, requesting, joking, etc.
Exactly.
To assert anything is to select means, words, tone, timing, to pursue an intended outcome, and that means every utterance presupposes the reality of agency and relevance. I
Yes.
must treat myself as capable of choosing and you as capable of interpreting. Otherwise, communication collapses into meaningless noise. That's why attempts to deny action, meaning, or value implode into performative contradiction. The content of the claim says there is no purposive action, but the performance of making the claim is itself purposive action, and it relies on the listener's purposive action to even register as a claim at all. So I mean, I guess we've probably already delivered this point with your correction that, it's the self that emerges from social context
Yep.
that's even capable of reflecting to know that it's acting.
Yeah.
I didn't approach it from that direction. I was thinking like, well, if we're going to use words, anytime someone uses words, it's like they're definitely using it as a means to an end, because you can't use words non-purposefully. Like
That's right.
that doesn't seem to make sense to me. Like anytime you're using words, it's like there's some purpose behind it. What else? I don't know if you could broaden that to tool use in general, but like anytime you see a human using a tool that
I
implies
I I,
action.
I do. I think, let's put it this way: insofar as a tool or words or anything is being used intelligently, it's being used to do problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
and as far as it's doing problem solving, it's doing framing, relevance realization, and goal directedness. Yes.
Wonderful. So yeah, I guess I said all of that. Why? It's like trying to gesture towards action as such, basically. And
Well. I mean, I might offer a suggestion.
please.
I think what's happening here is we're finding the interpenetration of these transcendentals,
Yeah.
which is interaction, meaning, communication, awareness, like
Yeah.
they're and embodiment. These are all, and action presupposes embodiment too,
Of course.
right? And what we're saying is these are primordial presuppositions. These processes, autopoiesis and relevance realization and interaction, all of these, right, have to be presupposed, even when we try to deny their existence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they're transcendental because they are the real conditions. They possibilize all knowledge, all interaction with being, things like that.
Yeah. 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 And then what is the grounding here? Like possibilizing, I don't want to say they make being possible, but
No,
the possibility of us accessing being at all is possibilized through those
well,
things. Yes.
if you get if you accept at least as plausible that the grammar of the mind and the grammar of relevance realization, reality realization of the same grammar, your possibilizing
Yeah.
in cognition is participating in how reality is, right,
And that,
possibilizing.
and that is the primordial presupposition, right? That's the
That's
good
right.
itself. That I
That's
think, as
right.
I've heard you say, that the promise that the structures of intelligibility will always track the structures of reality. We can never prove that. We have to have faith
Faith.
in that
That's right.
presupposition.
And I
Yeah.
stand by that statement.
And it makes sense. I mean, again, if the geometry of nature is fractal, well, then it would make sense that whatever the architecture of our intelligibility would have to reflect, the architecture of the
Yeah.
cosmos.
Especially if you, and evolution says you should, and physics says you should, and biology says you should, right? If you understand that we emerged in a participatory fashion from the world,
Yeah.
we weren't parachuted in here like Humean observers. We like life and cognition and self-reflection and reason all emerged by participating in the fundamental principles and processes and patterns of reality.
Right. Yes. Bingo. Okay. I want to ask you now. I'm going to like paraphrase something you said on one of your podcasts. And you said propositional knowing is grounded in the procedural use of skills,
That's right.
and our ability to move between skills is grounded in perspectival knowing.
That's right.
And then our ability to move between different states of consciousness is grounded in the participatory.
That's right.
And then I think you alluded to something like that. You believe that the participatory is ultimately grounded in something that is not a way of knowing, but makes all ways of knowing possible.
Yes.
Which sounds like the one or interaction.
Yep.
So, like, I don't know. What is that thing? What is it? What is the nesting structure as you see it now? And then what is the
Well, I still argue in the in the philosophical sense that's that nesting structure is right.
Yeah.
That and that our but what I was trying to get at. Let's try to go what I'm getting at, and then we'll tackle that question again. When you get to participatory knowing, the distinction between knowing and being breaks down.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. All right. That's what participation is, right? I'm knowing and being, right? It breaks down. And so it ultimately, right, that knowing is ultimately a being, and that being is, so any being, any individual,
Mm-hmm.
I'll use your term, act of being,
Mm-hmm.
depends on any being with a little b,
Mm-hmm.
depends on being with a big B, which
Yep.
is the basho, right, that makes possible continually, inexhaustibly, all of the beings. And so our act of participation participates in how every being participates in being itself.
Mm.
Now you want me to say, if that tracked, then your question is, well, what's that? But that's what we're back to. We're back to, I can only say what emanates from the one or what
Right.
emerges towards it. I can't say what it is.
Yes. To paraphrase, right? The eye does not see light, but sees by way of light.
That's
Just
right,
like a
and that's right
mind
from
cannot
Plotinus.
see
Yeah,
the
yeah.
one or the good, but it sees by way of the one or the good.
But for me, this is really important because that can sound, but it's actually the opposite. This is one of the central claims of Neoplatonism, especially Christian Neoplatonism. I was talking to Sarah, my beloved.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, didn't get to meet her.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Soon.
yes, soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was saying, one of the reasons why I love you is the fact that you're ultimately mysterious to me. No matter how much I transframe, I can't encompass you. You always are mysterious, not in like a creepy,
Mm-hmm.
killer novel, but in the sense that there's whatever framing I put on you, you always exceed that. There's a deep inexhaustibleness and complexity of you. And it's precisely because of that, right? That I like love is the painful recognition that something other than yourself is real. And part of recognizing that something is real is to recognize how much it can continually both touch you, but
Mm-hmm.
be beyond your touch, right? Draw you beyond
Yes.
yourself. So, what I'm saying is, when you realize the one, it sounds like a cold inferential result.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, what you get is a state of wondering,
Mm.
loving, moving.
At one moment, perhaps.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't find well, connecting it to action, I've found it to be very provocative to my responsibility. It's like, oh, if your
That was one of
actions
the
are
great strengths of the chapter you gave me, Robert. The way you said, look, if this is the case, if this is fundamental to ontology, to reality, and all normativity is about being in right relationship, right, to reality, then this, and that, performative contradictions matter. All you drew all this together and say ethics becomes so central. And
yeah.
it's and I'll sound paradoxical when I say it, but I'm trying to say it provocatively. You were making the argument that there's more to ethics than the ethical, that the ethical is ultimately ontological
Yeah.
in nature. That's what I heard you saying.
Yeah, and it's not my argument. I think
But it's still good. You still did a good job, is
thank
what I'm
you.
saying.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's the libertarian perspective in general. It's like we discover things like private property, for instance. It's not something we just made up. It's like, no, we discovered this about ourselves and it's a very useful social institution. Just like we discover gravity, right? We didn't
Yeah,
make
yeah.
it up. So yeah, there's a deep connection there. I want to go back to the thing you said. Okay, at the level of participatory knowing, the
Right.
distinction between
Knowing and
knowing
being.
and being breaks down.
That's
And
right.
that's what I've been wrestling with too, is like, I feel like if action is this thing, then it somehow does ground both epistemology and ontology.
I think
Could,
it's the co-
could,
I think
and
it's the common ground. I think it's the common ground for epistemological and ontological theorizing. Yes.
okay, there we go. That's the same correction again. So then, all right, is it possible for us to get beyond our own theories then? I guess that would be my question.
So truth is its own criteria. This is Spinoza. Real is always a comparative. I'm always looking,
Yeah.
I'm waking up, turning on the light,
Yeah.
enlightenment. I go to a bigger place that affords me being able to see the limitations and biases of the smaller place.
Right.
But I can never go to the no place. I can't get to the view from nowhere.
Yeah.
So, in one sense, to use a previous metaphor, I can always move the horizon in self correction and therefore know that I'm always pointing beyond my framing and remembering the large world, but I can never frame the large world and I can never, right,
Yeah.
grasp the large world. So I'm sorry, it sounds like a very complicated yes and no, but the point is either one of those, if you embrace either one of those, you get a disaster.
I see. So it's the tonos, right? We have to hold both
Yes.
of them in
And
tension.
humility, well, but think about it. This is Plato's great point. Your humanity, and this is where the ontology hits the ethics,
Mm-hmm.
is that you are finite in relationship to transcendent, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're finite
Mm-hmm.
transcendent. If you only hold on to your finitude, you despair and you become enslaved. And if you only hold on to your transcendence, you become hubristic and you become a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
But if I hold the two together, which is what I fundamentally am, then I will be neither the slave nor the tyrant. And that is, to me, those are like, the golden mean. These are
Yeah.
the two extremes that all of our ethics is working between.
Yes.
I don't want to be a slave, neither do I want to be a tyrant.
Beautifully said. Okay, I'm gonna read another little passage here, and this is a proposal. So
Please.
you have your 4 P's of knowing,
Yes.
which I'll just read it and then
Yep.
respond. I think it's correct, but let me know there could be holes in it. So for something to count as a type of knowing, it has to be one, it has to reduce uncertainty for an agent. Two, be action guiding.
Yep.
It helps select means towards ends.
Yep.
3, it has to be corrigible, meaning sensitive to error and revisable via feedback. 4, it needs to be shareable or coordination capable across agents, and that it can align many different perspectives
Also within the agent, it has to be, in that sense, memorable too, right?
within and between agents.
Yep.
And then 5, it has to track reality in a non-trivial way,
Yes.
meaning it reliably couples to constraints like scarcity trade-offs, opportunity cost, etc.
Yep.
My proposal to you is that pricing could be the 5th P of knowing, because pricing satisfies all 5. A price is a compressed, socially generated information that reduces uncertainty about relative scarcity and demand. It guides action by steering consumption, production, substitution, and investment. It is corrigible through profit and loss and competitive price discovery. It is intrinsically intersubjective, coordinating countless plans without requiring anyone to possess the whole picture. And it tracks reality precisely because it is disciplined by scarce means, rivalrous alternatives, and the requirement of voluntary exchange, making pricing a pragmatic, distributed form of knowing that is neither merely in the head nor merely in the world, but transjective between the two.
So what you're saying is, well, sorry, I'm hesitating because, of course, we can be talking about whether or not pricing is something we're talking about in financial terms, or we're talking about more broadly, like any kind of evaluation. So I'll put that aside. You can clarify. So let
Okay.
me come back. First of all, I like this proposal. What I'm hearing, and let's make sure I'm hearing you. I mean, you're saying there's a collective intelligence of a distributed cognition, and its way of knowing the world is the act, or the interaction of
Yep.
pricing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
Well,
so. Like
I want to ask. I guess in a short question, who, who is the knower? Who is holding the knowing?
that's where it's mysterious, because it's like the market. And there's a saying in Wall Street: the market's always smarter than you, or the market can stay. How do they put it? The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So like
Yeah,
it has all of the information encoded into it that none of us individually have. That's the whole
yeah, yeah.
point
It's
of
a
the
hyper
market.
object. It's a
It's a
hyper
hyper
object.
object. Yeah. So
Yeah,
when you ask who is the knower, it's like, well, it's this whole giant collective
but
intelligence
but
process.
but I don't have any problem with that. That's why I said it the way I said it.
Yeah.
Because you know that Dan Chiappi and I, we've published papers about how the distributed cognition, the collective intelligence of distributed cognition, has its own agency, can solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
No individual. Who This is Hutchins, who navigates an ocean liner on the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
two hyper objects, right, and interacting. Nobody does. It's a system. It's a dynamical system of people and technology, and they together navigate the ship. And So the analogy I would be using would be the market is like the market is like that whole system, and pricing is like the navigation.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you?
And basically, to clarify, pricing is like, it's just a record of the last trade, basically. Right. So there's
I
a
know,
whole.
I get it. So what you're doing is you're trying to,
So yeah,
because
in that sense, I'm reinforcing your point. Yes, it's very much like instrumentation, right? It's like when
that
you're in the cockpit and the altitude says you're at, or the altimeter says you're at a certain altitude, it's telling you like where you were most recently, basically, which is the
yeah,
same thing a price is doing for a
there's
good.
that, which I get, but where I was going is you've already also answered the question, because for me, knowing and remembering are bound up together. Each
Mm,
kind of knowing has its own kind of memory, and you just gave the memory. You said
mm,
that pricing is actually the report on a previous sequence of interactions. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, that is correct. And then for, just
So the pricing represents a remembering and a determining.
yeah,
Yes.
it's so what the Austrians say something like all value is subjective, right? So it's ordinal. You can only have preferences first, second, third, fourth. But then through interaction, we turn our stacked preferences into cardinal prices, right? Like trades actually clear at a certain price, and that becomes the quote unquote objective record of our social evaluation on goods over time.
I think you're saying what I'm saying. The memory isn't stored in any person. The
Right.
memory is stored in
It's a
sort of
collective record, collective ledger. Yeah.
yes, exactly. There's a
It's what a
collective
stock market is, right? Like you go and look at the stock market, it's like it's all those histories
no,
basically.
this is really good because I think there's the two components to knowing. There is remembering
Mm.
and determining, relevance realization, optimal gripping, determining, but also remembering, and how you're remembering and how you're determining are mutually
Yes.
constraining and affecting each other. I'm just
100%.
trying to amplify your model. I, that's really interesting. Um, Now it's interesting. It's obviously okay. This is a different question. Sorry, you said it would be provocative. Um, so it's interesting because this is not a kind of knowing that any individual human being possesses. It is a kind of knowing, by the way we've
Mhm.
described it, even sort of defined it, that is only it's only the hyper process of the market that can track the hyper patterns of the economy. And that is the only place where that kind of knowing actually exists. We, of course,
Yeah.
participate in it.
Yeah.
Um,
The knowing of distributive cognition, perhaps.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The remembering and the determining of distributed cognition. I think that's right. Now, the question is, so first of all, it's right. Hear that. I think you're onto something. By the way, you are doing so much better than many of the people on the right I talk to. I don't even know whether you think of yourself on the right or left.
No, I despise
Yeah,
politics and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You and I too we're metapolitical. What I mean by that is you are trying, in a really philosophically astute and with humility and integrity, to give an ontology for economics, broadly construed. And
No.
don't sorry, don't do that, Robert. I think it's really good. I think
Thank you. Well, it's just every time you say it's like it's not mine though. I'm just
and my
assuming.
theories aren't just mine either.
Yeah, yeah.
I always give credit, you're giving credit, but right now I'm giving you credit
Thank
because
you.
you just like I am the gateway for you, you're a gateway for me, right? And so I think that's really good. Now the question I have, this is a philosophical question, is that, like, is pricing a species or a genus? Is it
Mm.
the only kind of knowing that distributed cognition has, or is there other kinds?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I immediately think of books and great literature, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, there's known in a different language, right? They're in literacy rather than money
yeah,
or numeracy in the case of pricing. But a book like the Bible, well,
yeah,
that's part of distributed cognition. I
yeah,
often,
yeah. And
so,
language itself is generated. Nobody
yeah,
made or runs English.
right.
Yeah,
Mythology, literature, these things seem to be part of distributed cognition as well. But again, I guess it's like, well, what do you mean by distributed cognition? And it's just the things that the example I give for the Bible often is like you could go and try to burn as many Bibles as you want, but you're never going to get rid of the Bible as an idea, right? Like it's everywhere and
sure.
nowhere, and it's
Yeah, and
presumably permanently in our consciousness, although not entirely permanently. And I guess we've lost great books before, but
yeah, we have, and but but the Bible coordinates interactions across many individuals so that things happen that no individual could bring about.
exactly,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
What did you say
yeah,
that you can't understand the grammar of your cognition without understanding the grammar of the Bible? I think you said
yeah, the
something like
Bible
that.
and Plato. Those,
Yeah.
if you don't understand those two, you're pretty messed up. Um, which is why a lot of people are messed up.
Yeah.
They're using languages they really don't understand, I'm not trying to sound harsh. I'm trying to sound helpful.
Mm.
Uh, I'll have to think about this, but
No.
the idea that distributed collective intelligence of distributed cognition have an agency, a remembering and a determining. That's a kind of knowing. That's really good because it's not propositional. It's not procedural. It's not perspectival. Is it participatory? I have to think about this, Robert.
Okay.
But let me say, it's a really good proposal.
Well, that's all I wanted to do was propose it and let you marinate on it.
So there's a very special place called the farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000 acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, and we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you.
Yep.
And it again just occurred to me listening to your stuff and then, having connected the dots with the libertarian views on the importance of price signals. That was it, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, this one
but sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I just want to note this. There is a generic thing here because there's a way in which the collective intelligence of distributed cognition is like it's getting signal. It's harvesting information
Mhm.
in a way that is relevant to its autopoiesis and to its self-correcting. Um, um, Now that's an interesting question. Sorry. Do you think the market is self-organizing or autopoietic? I sort of got ahead of myself there.
That is a great question. And I would have to say it's autopoietic because
You think it seeks out the conditions that preserve its own existence?
Yeah, when you consider that each individual market actor is seeking out the conditions that preserve their own existence, the collective outcome of that would, I presume, be the same,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, would it be correct to say that markets seek then? Because if we could say they seek and they seek signals, you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to flesh out what you're proposing.
Yeah, it's semantic. It's semantic again. I would say the libertarian perspective is that only a human can engage in goal-directed behavior, right? It would be maybe slightly remiss to say a market could engage in goal-directed behavior. But then when the market is just the compilation of all the goal-directed actors, well, then is it not itself engaging in goal-directed?
Yeah.
And the market does, and again, that's why the market's utterly unpredictable. Like we don't have no idea what it will do because it's everyone competing and cooperating and trading against each other and trying to exploit information asymmetries and all of these things. And the culmination of that is this, utterly unpredictable process.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a hyper process tracking hyper patterns. And Eric Hole, I think, is largely right that these higher orders have like they have unique causal and information gathering capacities that you don't find at the lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to think about this. This is, I mean, I guess I'll leave the point because you have others, but my final point on this point is I encourage you to keep pursuing this, this idea. I think yeah.
I certainly will. And I am happy to be your gateway drug to any of the libertarian philosophers that I've enjoyed reading. And yeah, I hope, if you'll continue doing what you do, That just gives me all the ammo I need to come up with these things for you. Okay. I guess I'll go to this one next. I'm skipping ahead one, but it seems like it's more relevant. Because this is another thing I picked up from your work. You've described flow states. You talk
Yep.
about it a lot in your work. The three conditions for flow states: information must be free flowing, feedback loops are tight, and failure matters.
Yep.
Uh,
Free flowing and clear.
free flowing and clear. And
It can't be like vague.
right. And here's the interesting thing, hopefully. Those three conditions that you've named are also, they closely correspond to the conditions for free markets.
Well,
So,
they're also the conditions that set up a scientific experiment that allow you to distinguish causation from correlation. That was the connection that I made in the flow paper with Leo and Arian. That the conditions for setting up an experiment, the conditions for the flow state, are the same kinds of conditions.
oh, wow.
So what's happening biologically when you're in the flow state? Not only is it an insight cascade,
Mm-hmm.
which it is, but you're implicitly picking up on a lot of patterns, and your brain is you have these conditions are met, and so your brain is saying it's plausible and highly probable that the patterns you're picking up on are real causal patterns, not merely correlational, because it's the same kind of structure that you put into an experiment in order to distinguish causation from correlation. And so I would turn it back to you that, that maybe that's what's being done, is that causal patterns are being sifted from correlational patterns at a degree of high dimensionality of complexity, that we need this massive distributed cognition, collective intelligence to because we got to, what multidimensional means. Like,
Yeah.
when you try to graph it, you're like, you've got like 150 dimensions
Yeah.
to your graph, kind of, right? And so, and what the market is doing is it's sifting causal patterns from correlational patterns, and that matters.
Definitely, because if it's causal, well, that's something you can act upon, right? That's something that's
That's right. And if it's
actionable.
correlational, it does not afford action.
Exactly. So the three conditions that correspond to those conditions for flow in a market are accurate price signals, which
That's
is
right.
basically the information distribution mechanism in a market.
Got it.
Um, the second one is tight feedback loop. So basically, you need to have the less interference there is in a marketplace, whether this be criminal or regulatory, the
Yep.
more feedback you get, basically, right? Like if you start a
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
and you're
So
not getting a subsidy to
yeah. Yeah.
keep you alive and you go out of business, well, then you've just been informed that that business model doesn't work in that time and that place.
Right.
But if there's some subsidy flowing into you, then maybe your business can become a zombie company. We've talked about that
Yeah.
before, right? It can persist
Yeah.
even though there's no consumer demand. So you need real feedback, basically. And then you need private property, which means failure matters. These things they're all related, by the way, because you can only have accurate price signals if you have private property, because without real ownership, there's no real exchange. This is one of Mises's crowning achievements.
Did he also say without owner, like there's no also like there's no way to specify responsibility?
Exactly. So
Okay.
property is both a right and a responsibility, right? If you don't keep up the maintenance on your car, well, then you're not going to enjoy the rights to its use very long, right? It's going to
Right.
break down. So, so basically, if there's no real ownership, there's no real exchange. And if you don't have real exchange, you don't have price discovery. So all these things are connected, right? It's like strong private property, no interference, no coercive interference, and then accurate price signals. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. The connection was like, okay, if flow is the psychology of learning, I don't know, the psychology, I don't know, the enactment. It's like a discovery process, right? Like the rock climber is discovering things in real time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's a cognitive process. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the market is a similar discovery process, just in at a different strata.
Yeah. And what it's discovering is how to be connected to the reality of the economy,
Yes.
just like the scientific experiment is trying to help us realize how to be connected to reality. And the
Yes.
rock climber is discovering how to be connected to the rock.
Yes. So
Yeah,
religio.
yeah, exactly. Now that's interesting. So, I mean, I can see where you are. I won't light the match on your gunpowder yet. But yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead. That was actually, I mean, that one's not too sophisticated, really.
Well, I mean, this goes towards previous conversations we've had about fiat currency distorting all of these three conditions
that's right.
and therefore uncoupling the market, potentially maybe even the economy. I don't know where to put this from reality in some really dangerous way. That I mean, that's an oversimplification of your argument, but I think it's a fair synopsis of your argument.
Well, very fair. And you just say like the movement of a price. If in an economy where money's not being manipulated or printed, the movement of that price gives you maximal information about supply and demand.
Yes.
But if the money's being printed arbitrarily, well, then you don't know. Like, did the housing price go up because there's more dollars in circulation, or because people actually want more houses? So you
Right.
basically are introducing noise into the channel, and so to the extent noise is a lie or a deception, or
And you're also reducing error signal. That was your previous example. So
exactly,
feedback is getting reduced.
yes,
And so the coupling is being uncoupled. I get it.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That, yes. Yes.
and private property of savers is being violated. So the people that are saving in the currency, they want their purchasing power to, stay the same or go up over time, or having their purchasing power diminished.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Like, I guess the idea there is like this flow state thing.
Flow state is, optimal coupling. Now, for us, it is cognitive and affective. And so it comes with awareness and
Yeah.
experience. And we were already hesitant, or you were hesitant about a trip. I wouldn't attribute any of those things. So I think, like Dan and I have explicitly argued, I think it's reasonable to think that collective intelligence has agency because it can solve problems
Mm,
reliably that we can't solve as individuals. I
yeah.
don't think there's any evidence for it having. This is why I asked you the seeking question.
Hmm.
You were like, well, I'm not sure, which is a good answer, by the way. Um, I'm very. I would not conclude that there's anything analogous to consciousness,
Yeah.
and therefore, insofar as there's two dimensions to flow: optimal performance and optimal experience. I think the optimal
Mm,
experience part is gone. The optimal performance
mm,
is yes, but optimal performance for who? This is because this goes back to the seeking market. Is the
hmm.
market seeking to optimally perform, or are we
Mm,
seeking for the market to optimally perform? You see
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Mises,
don't know that. I have to think about that.
Mises, I think, would say that, in a free market, the consumer is sovereign.
Yeah.
So people that are voting with their wallet are basically saying what they want, what problems they want solved, essentially.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
producers they meet that demand with supply, basically. So here's a question about that. Do you think those shared attributes between flow states and free markets, because you use this term often, cultural cognitive grammar?
Yes.
And so that occurred to me. It's like, oh, well, the flow state is more cognitive. This free market is more cultural. Are we identifying like a grammar that's common between these different
Uh,
processes?
okay. Well, you're doing some. Okay. So what I meant by cultural cognitive grammar is
I may
that
be misinterpreting, by the way.
no, no,
So
no,
yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no, 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 no. You're not. You're not. You're taking it in a direction I hadn't thought, which is good. I mean, sorry, I'm not casting you in a role, but every teacher wants their student to do things with their work that they haven't themselves
I'm
done.
honored to be your student.
Okay. So, yeah. So what I meant cultural cognitive grammar, I was talking about that earlier point about how the inner and the outer interpenetrate the
Hmm.
cultural, right? But you're saying, can it be also that, like the Neoplatonic idea, that both are sharing the same, are participating in the same fundamental principles? And those two meanings, by the way, actually converge. I just hadn't put the convergence together.
Mm,
That's why I'm finding it juicy and tasty. And so yeah, I think that's right. I think that that's what I was toying with a minute ago. Like that there's something like an optimal performance of the market, which is like the optimal performance part of the flow state. I don't think
mhm.
there's the optimal experience, but there's something going on there. That's very interesting. And because it means there's a possibility. Oh, that's really good. There's a possibility for something analogous. What if we had like what if we had sorry, this is bachelor's notion that the Buddha, the state of enlightenment is I don't just flow here, I don't just flow there, I flow everywhere
Hmm.
in all aspects of my life, which I put to you would be the optimal interaction, right? And what if we were flowing and then the culture as a whole was flowing, like you're, and like, what kind of, that's a pretty good world, right? That's a pretty good world.
That's the libertarian. I don't want to use the word utopia, but it's
No,
like
I don't like
the
utopias.
closest we can come to an ideal world, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And on the optimal performance point, there's something to be said, right, for competition and how that pushes people to excel, right? There's a
Well,
reason we have
demand
exact.
flow requires demand,
Yeah, and you need
demanding circumstances. Yeah.
yeah, and you need competition to push product quality higher and product cost lower, so we get more and more economic solutions to our problems basically.
So let me ask you a question then, because earlier we were talking about cooperation,
Mhm.
and now we're talking about competition. Is optimal performance some optimal grip between cooperation and competition? Because I could think of cooperation drowning competition, but I could think of people being competitive to the point where, like a criminal, in my mind, is too competitive, for example,
Right.
because they're undermining the fundamental cooperation that we need in order to share meaning, share labor, etc. Do you think optimal performance is an optimal grip between cooperation and competition?
I do. And I think that where you draw the line for me is private property ultimately. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you want people to compete all out within the limiting principle of private property, right? Don't steal, don't kill, don't
Right.
coerce. Like, as long as you don't violate those ethical and moral principles, then yeah, by all means, undercut me in pricing, introduce a
Yeah.
superior product. Like these things all benefit the consumer. They might put you out of business as a competitor and you might not like it. The Italian shoemaker doesn't like it when the factory opens around the corner that, generates 1,000 times more shoes than he can, but it benefits the consumer ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we do want, I think that's what capitalism is in a way. Like, and again, that word has been so utterly decimated. Like people think that we have capitalism in the world, but that's a whole nother can of worms. Let's just say that cooperation, well, we're talking about cooperation. This idea of people peacefully competing to solve one another's problems at a profit is a really good idea. Like we get to channel all of our animalistic energies into a
Yeah. I mean,
productive enterprise.
regardless of what about capitalism, like I think that complex dynamical systems can only be managed.
Mm-hmm.
That might not be the right verb, by complex dynamical systems. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, to me, that is the fundamental proposal that distinguishes capitalism from, like, state communism, which is no, the best thing that for running, like, complex dynamical systems of culture and economy is some command structure,
Mm-hmm.
some bureaucracy. And capitalism says no. The best thing is the collective intelligence of distributed cognition, which is itself an evolving dynamical system. So again, I don't like you. I'm very hesitant around these terms because you criticize a communist and they'll say, well, you've never done communism, and you
Mm-hmm.
criticize a capitalist and say, well, it's not capitalism. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to participate in those, because those are useless shell games. But insofar as we can ask the question, like, how are you proposing that we try to optimally interact, to use our word,
Mm-hmm.
with these complex hyper patterns? And I think the answer has been, from the Paleolithic onwards, we form collective intelligence of distributed cognition that dynamically self organizes. And that's our best way of tracking. Uh, uh, you know, um, so in that way, I do think that the economy is cultural
Mm-hmm.
in a
Of
deep way,
course.
and I think culture is better than bureaucracy. Um,
Yeah.
uh, That's what that's so.
That lands. Yeah, more organic, more adaptive.
More adaptive, more living, more dynamical,
Yeah.
more self-correcting, and more rapidly self-correcting. And in that way, it's supposed to be. I mean, these are the two other things that are not like they should be. It's supposed to be like democracy. It's supposed to be like science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good stuff. Okay. So I'm going to ask you this. We talked about this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning just because we started out talking about the subject object dichotomy and how
Yeah.
interaction could be the prior unity to that. I want to read this quick piece here because while I listened to an episode, I think you did it with Greg Enriquez. You guys are talking about the post enlightenment gap. Actually,
Yeah, that's
no,
Greg. We got yep.
this may have been something you wrote. Actually, I'm not.
We're writing a book on consciousness.
Okay. So,
And we think the mind body problem, the consciousness problem, can't be solved without breaking us out of the gridlock of modernity.
I see. Okay, so I'll read this real quick. This is just another, I guess, proposal that interaction, in the sense we've been using it, is a way to reconcile a lot of these dichotomies. So the axiom of action, man acts, reconciles the post-enlightenment gap by showing that the modern dichotomies, like subject-object, fact-value, is-ought, theory, data, analytic, synthetic, are not ultimate fractures in reality, but analytic cuts within one living event, purposeful agency meeting constraint.
Mm-hmm.
In every action, an actor or a subject employs scarce means, which are objective, toward chosen ends, thereby fusing is and ought in practice without pretending to derive moral laws from physics. Likewise, action makes theory and data mutually dependent because theory is a tool for filtering experience and data only becomes signal inside a goal-directed frame.
Yes.
Because the axiom cannot be denied without performative contradiction, it functions as a uniquely synthetic a priori anchor. That's a Kantian reference.
Yes.
So it's necessary like logic, yet it's also about the world of lived behavior, which dissolves the idea that reason floats free from reality or that empiricism can speak without prior categories. The upshot of this is epistemic humility. There is no view from nowhere, no omniscient social engineering, because action proves what we can know universally, goal-directed behavior, while leaving open the irreducible uncertainty of particular human acts. Thus, action becomes the bridge where mind and matter, science and meaning, knowledge and wisdom meet in the agent arena dance.
I agree with that. It's convergent with a lot of arguments I've been making, and I think that's fundamentally right. I think interaction, the way we've been talking about it, does all of this. I think it's beneath, before, between, and beyond all the dichotomies, the four Bs. I said three earlier. I meant to do the four, and it is the most irremovable, because I'm trying not to use the word certain. It's the most irremovable dimension of our experience. Like, like any attempt to, like for example, the dichotomies: mind and body are two totally different substances. But my every experience I have is them interacting, and yet your dichotomy denies what every experience, even the act of thinking about, right, the mind body problem, right, requires. I'm just doing an example of what you're talking about.
Yes.
And so I think that's fundamentally right. And I think, by the way, I'll have to ask Nicole if she's okay with this, but I think this is what the Buddhists mean by, everything is impermanent and interconnected. They mean the ultimate reality is interaction, which is before, beneath, between, and beyond, both the relata and the analytic relations between things. Yes, exactly.
Is that pure relationality then?
Well, that's what I think. that's what I proposed to James, that's what
Yeah.
he means by pure relationality. But it would be like this: just like the one is not the numerical one,
Yeah.
pure relationality is not any kind of relation.
Right. I think there's convergence there too, right? If you consider the one as like the principle of unity, that the pure
Yes.
relationality is kind of saying the same thing. It's
Well, that's
everything's,
exactly what
yeah,
James argues. James
yeah,
Filler, exactly what he argues.
yeah.
Brilliant work, by the way.
I
I
read that
think
one
he
as well.
absolutely,
Yeah. It's a
yeah,
great book.
actually demolishes substance on ontology. I think just completely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one wonderful book. Okay. Maybe just two more questions here. I don't know
Sure.
if that is
Yeah.
questions. Um, all right. To talk about the transcendentals, beauty, goodness, and truth.
These are the Platonic, not the Kantian transcendentals. So
That's
for
right.
Kant, the transcendental, that's his term for a condition on the possibility of knowing,
Okay.
right? The transcendentals in the Platonic term are the fundamental ways in which being, reality, discloses itself. They are the universal grammar of reality.
Right. And you referred to Schindler's work, right? The
Oh, D.C.
primacy,
Schindler, David's work is amazing.
yeah,
Yes.
the primacy of beauty, the
Yeah.
centrality of goodness, and the ultimacy of truth. I
Yep, and I've
wonder if,
done 2 courses so far on the for the Peterson Academy. One on the primacy of beauty, and I just finished the centrality of goodness. Yep.
oh,
So
perfect. Well, I was wondering if you could just maybe wax on that for a moment. Like what does
yeah.
that mean?
Okay. So let's talk about um, beauty, not as we see it, which Han calls the smooth, the
Mm-hmm.
easily consumable. Um, uh, so let's say that one of the defining features of modernity is what Ricoeur calls the hermeneutics of suspicion. It's because of Freud and Marx and Nietzsche and Feuerbach. You know, uh, everything's projection and everything's a secret agenda, and appearances are always deceptive. And this is an old argument made by Plato, redone again by Merleau-Ponty. But wait. I can only say that's an illusion
Mm-hmm.
by pointing to something else that I'm using as my touchstone,
Right.
great word, by the way, for real. And so the ancient proposal is that beauty is when appearances don't deceive, but
Mm.
appearances disclose reality. And that's why it has primacy. You have to start there. If you say appearances are always deceptive, right? Even my own perception of when I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying that, like you're in absolute solipsistic, absolute skepticism.
Right.
You can't
Everything
get
is
started.
tall, I think, as you put it
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, so and beauty sort of emerges in sort of 3 ways, because there's 3 kinds of appearances. Three ways in which things appear as a verb, like I'm using appear as a verb. Bottom up, out of emergence. So we find things beautiful when their growth discloses what they are. That's what, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we love that. We also love the beauty that emanates from our ideals, right? There's a beauty to justice. There's a way justice allows us to see through illusions and into what is really going on. It allows us to cut through the bullshit to what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, and then there's the beauty of how things are, right, are actualizing, right, how the emergence and the emanation are coming together. So the primacy of beauty is from primordiality down from ultimacy and also within actuality.
Mm.
There's 3 kinds of, and these are sort of 3 ways in which things are beautiful. That's the primacy of beauty. The centrality of goodness. Well, what is the centrality of goodness? The centrality of goodness is this one's harder for me because I just did that course and I've got like 8 hours of lectures in my head. So everything is simultaneously, to be real, everything is for itself and for other things. Because if it was just for itself, it's unknowable,
Mm-hmm.
no intelligibility.
Right.
If it's just known and it's not in any way
But
for
it's not
itself,
real.
that's not real.
Mm.
So everything is for itself and for others. And so that basic capacity for things to be real by being for themselves and for others is the fundamental basis for all of our judgments of how good things are. That's the centrality of goodness.
Mm.
It is what allows us to, it binds together and holds together the the what is emanating and what is emerging. And look what this is. This is for itself and for others.
Mm.
This is like,
It's a feedback loop.
pardon me.
Feedback loop.
Exactly. This is a dynamical system. Here are the selective constraints. Here's the enabling constraints, and the good is this. The good is the
Mm.
feedback looping, right? And it's central because that's where the actuality is. That's where the interaction is,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? And then the ultimacy of truth. Well, truth stands for, right, reality realizing itself such that we can be corrected in our attempts to solve our problems. And that's ultimate for us. Why is it ultimate for us? We've been bumping up against it the whole time you and I have been talking, because every time we try to grasp it, we realize we've made a mistake and we're called beyond it to something more real by which we correct it. And then we realize, oh shit, this goes all the way up. That's
Mm-hmm.
ultimacy. That's the ultimacy of truth.
Mm. Beautiful. I've thought a lot about these transcendentals, and I've they're very mysterious. I think when you first encounter them,
I think there's a fourth, by the way.
intelligibility,
Yeah.
which is an affordance.
Yeah. Yeah. They
So is
all
it?
are affordances.
Oh, they're all
Beauty,
affordances. Okay,
well, beauty is the affordance of discovery. Goodness is the affordance of interaction. Ultimacy is the affordance of correction.
interesting. Okay, so can we double click on goodness then? Because if it's the affordance of interaction, and an affordance is a real possibility for action, are we
Yes.
saying a real possibility
What do you,
for
yeah,
action of interaction?
touching and being touched, being for itself
Okay,
and for others is what has to be in order for there to be interaction. If it's
right.
totally for itself, you can't interact with it. If it's totally just for you, you can't interact with it.
Got it. I guess my confusion was the way I've been framing affordances is that action or interaction is ontologically prior to affordance. Like you have to have an actor before you can have an affordance.
No, they're like this.
The
Like
two
it's like
sides.
asking, like, you know, is E equals MC squared prior to all the relativistic events? Or it's like,
Oh, I see. So it's like
yeah.
orthogonal in a way.
Well, it's no. This is my argument against a classic merely top down Plotinus. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's top down all the way down and bottom up all the way up.
Okay. If you're a Bitcoiner, you need the Orange Club app. It's where you can connect with other sovereign individuals locally and globally. It's great for when you travel to meet local Bitcoiners, to go to Bitcoin meetups, and to discover local merchants that accept sats. No distractions, no noise, just real Bitcoiners. So download the Orange Club app today and find your local Bitcoin tribe. Okay, I want to share a metaphor. Well, again, not my metaphor, but it's just a metaphor that I was using to try and interpret and understand the transcendentals, the
Please.
beauty, goodness, and truth specifically, not intelligibility.
Yeah.
And so I often find myself going back to the map territory metaphor, right? The classic saying that the map is not the territory. And I was considering beauty as like the unmapped territory. So like the perceptual encounter with the real prior to any categorization. And the unknown, it's the unknown basically, right? It can be both promising or threatening. I've heard you reference some poet who said beauty was like an angel that looks like it could kill you, but deigns not to.
That's Rilke.
Which sounds a lot like Mother Nature, It's like, well, that's where all the food is, but it's also where all the predators are. So it's like this kind of raw encounter with nature. Goodness, I was analogizing or metaphorizing rather as the act of mapping itself. And so, this is why goodness is closely aligned to action. We even call things economic goods, obviously in markets. And to your point on its centrality, it's simultaneously top down and bottom up,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
outward from the map and inward from the territory, right? It's
Yeah.
the relation between the map and the territory, basically. And then truth was like the agreement between aspects of mapped territory, or correspondence between the map and the territory. So there's the saying, all true maps must align. If they all refer to the same territory, then they must kind of point the same direction. And I guess in that metaphor, that the keys on the map would be propositions, and propositional truth is like agreement among those propositions. So I don't know if that, I don't know, is that metaphor a useful way to bring beauty,
Well,
goodness, and truth down to
let me
earth
play
for
with it.
people?
Yeah, I think beauty would be not the territory, but what was discovered from the territory that allows me to make the map.
Okay, so like the horizon of perception, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and the landmarks.
Yeah.
So that's that. A landmark is when appearance discloses reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think your idea of mapping as what goodness is, that lands. Uh, I think correspondence I'm a little bit hesitant for because that sounds like modernity.
Mm-hmm.
But we are talking about a representation. I would say more the truth is how you correct your map.
Mm,
Um, and or how you correct your orienting with the map.
I see.
That's um,
So
yeah.
feedback from the territory,
Yeah, the
or the
feedback from
landmarks,
the
rather.
territory. Yeah, that makes you. Yeah, you have your beautiful landmarks, and then you've got you, you've got a way of right tracking, interacting, uh, way of realizing. That's mapping, and but you also have a way of correcting. That's the
Mm,
normative thing to make it a better map. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
that's so pretty close, I think.
Okay, beautiful. One other thing about the map and the territory, and then I'll move on to our last question. The classic saying is the map is not the territory, right? Which is something like the representation cannot contain all the details of that which it represents.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
small world is never the large world.
there you go, bingo. Um, but it seems like there's a little bit of a paradox here, perhaps, because I was thinking that the map itself is the territory in the sense that it's made from real actions and real materials. Like it's made of things from the
But
world.
what you're saying is the map can only be propositionally truthful if it has participatory relationship. If the map is also to some degree participating in the actual principles of embodiment and physicality and taking up space and orientable and all that stuff that have to be the case in order for it to be a map. The map has to not only represent reality, it has to participate in reality.
Yes, I think that's exactly what I was trying to say. And then I was using that as like a segue to get to that sort of paradoxical nature of either Nishida's absolute nothingness or the first principle, whichever.
Yeah.
Nishida's absolute nothingness is he's probably the one that goes hardest on the paradoxicality, right? He's constantly.
Well, Nicholas of Cusa in the Christian Neoplatonic tradition does
Oh, okay.
that as deeply. And in fact, Nicholas of Cusa's definition, again, not a definition
Mm.
of God, is the place where all the coincidence of opposites. So the
Right.
opposites, not in contradiction, but all the opposites in paradox actually like they coincide, like
Mm.
you did with all the maps, all true maps
Mm-hmm.
align. The place where like I do it, like the two sides of the paradox are like my left and my right fields of vision, and God is the depth perception
Mm-hmm.
that's possible through that. That's Nicholas of Cusa.
Yes. Okay. That's fantastic. So, one last question, and then I'll move on to the last one. Are are opposites pure? Do they exist purely at the epistemological layer, or do they exist in ontological reality as well?
I mean, I don't think it's or. I think there are opposites that are just nominal. Nominal's the like the philosophical term for they're
Yeah,
only there because we cut up reality
they're
in certain
conceptual,
ways.
basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I don't think reality has. I, I'll say it. I'm not an anomalist. I think there are real patterns, and
Yeah.
insofar there are real patterns, there's real differences between causes and constraints. For example, actuality
I
and
see.
possibility. For example, causation and correlation. For example, and so those things, right? Insofar as we see them as opposites, I would say they reflect the 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 non-homogeneous nature of reality that is presupposed by saying that reality is a dynamical, complex system.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful because I was wound around the axle of like, are all these opposites just in the conceptual layer and we're making something out of nothing? But that makes sense. Like uh, causality and constraints, they have to be bound together.
That's right. That's right.
Um, okay. This is the actual last question. Uh, so I mean, I guess I just have to thank you first. You know, you do such a good job of philosophy, right? The love of wisdom, and
Thank
you
you.
elaborate on it a lot. And you, like I said, you're a gateway drug to many thinkers, and I know you've been impactful and influential on a lot of people and their work. And I think it's wonderfully important. But one of my favorite things you've ever said is like, it's not just about the love of wisdom; it's also about learning to love wisely.
Exactly.
And my
That is my models for this is are Socrates and Jesus, and of course it would be ridiculous if I was claiming to be Socrates or Jesus or in that.
Mhm.
I'm not claiming that, but I'm saying for me, they're not just lovers of wisdom, they also exemplify loving wisely. In fact, one of the few things Socrates claimed to know was ta erotica. He knew how to love wisely.
Mm,
And of course, Jesus is the logos agape. He is not only wisdom and love, he's about the love of wisdom and wise loving.
mm,
Uh, and so for me, those are the two exemplary figures. I, the one thing that my life would be successful by if I like if I were to judge it, if I loved wisely such that people found me wisely trustworthy of love.
mm. Well, I think you're doing a great job. So just on Christ and Socrates, the other thing that really strikes me about them is that they both fully incarnate, as in the flesh, in
Yes.
flesh, their philosophy. And as
Yes.
we've talked before, you know, well, actions speak louder than words. There's no,
Yeah.
you can, if you talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk, then it's meaningless. And so,
Yeah, that's one interpretation of the incarnation, that Jesus is God indeed. That
yes,
he's like the incarnation is God acting in humanity. Yes.
yes. Yeah. And that's, I mean, why we need those stories because it's not, there's no formula that can just, oh, here's wisdom, right? Here's the recipe for wisdom. It's like,
No.
no, you
No.
have to, I don't know, these archetypal stories basically, they
Well,
seem indispensable.
there's no formal system for relevance realization. There's no algorithm.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I want to conclude with a little bit of a personal question. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Um, but on this idea of loving wisely, I've also heard you say that you fell in love with Sarah's soul
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
And
The only time that's ever happened to me.
I wanted to ask you how you went about doing that.
Well, I didn't go about doing it the way one makes a salad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I did is I had come to the conclusion that my merely, and this is was it because of decadent romanticism, that my attraction, my sexual emotional attraction radar, I'd come to the conclusion that I had been just letting that run instinctively,
Hmm.
decadent romanticism, and realizing that was really screwing me up,
Hmm.
getting me into bad relationships. And so I decided to do active open-mindedness. I got very, very clearly what's the type I keep getting attracted to physically, physiologically, because
Hmm.
first appearances.
Of course.
And my type was tall, long, blonde hair. Sarah is short and black hair, brunette. And so she didn't trigger my initial type. So my salience radar wasn't going off. But instead, I had a sense there's something more to this woman. And we're on the second date, and she started to talk. She's a dentist. She started to talk about, I call it the Zen dentistry moment. She started to talk about being a dentist, and this focus and presence and depth
Mm.
came over her, and I went, "Whoa, you're so beautiful." And then later, and I started to realize that Sarah is, like many men find Sarah extremely physically attractive. And now she has become, I can honestly say this, my radar has shifted. She is now the type I find women attractive to the degree to which they resemble or remind me of Sarah. So I fell in love with her soul first.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for answering a personal question. But I just think it's very important how these things, well, how you incarnate them in life. And I know you had said that, so I just wanted to ask and hear it from you.
Well,
That's a beautiful
and
story.
we've made a lifetime commitment because, um, again, changing the radar. Like, we have both realized, in both senses of the word realize, that we reliably bring out the best in each other. And
Mm.
that's a better understanding of love than just the satisfaction of desire.
Mm-hmm.
I find being with Sarah tremendously satisfying. Don't misunderstand me. But what I mean is, the reason why I want to be with Sarah for the rest of my life, and the reason she wants to be with me, is because we reliably bring out the best in each other. And that is, I think, what love and deep beauty really are. And that's what Plato argued they really were. So I finally got what Socrates was talking about in my relationship to Sarah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. I don't think words can even do it justice, but you know, your work is amazing. I think you're a great man. And I really look forward to speaking with you again.
Well, I really hope. I mean, you and I have an ongoing relationship, and you can text me whenever you want. And I hope I've always been very receptive whenever you
You
do,
have.
because I want an ongoing relationship with you. I want to reiterate: keep doing what you're doing, Robert. The attempt to get a deep philosophical ontology for money and pricing and market that plugs us into, the fundamentals of cognition and, and ethics and being. We need that. uh, I, I I I I don't know if you agree. I think you probably do, but I think we're in for some very rough economic times.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and paradoxically, the people that can see most deeply are the people we need most in those rough times, because the temptation is to act very superficially and reactively, and that almost always makes things worse.
Yeah.
It's the people that can stay calm and centered and look to the depths of things that get us through. And what you're doing is becoming that kind of person and making that available. So I strongly encourage you to keep doing what you're doing.
I will do that. And thank you. Thank you for the increased motivation. Um, yeah. Thank you so much, John. Where can people find you on the internet?
So they can find me on my YouTube channel. They can buy my book from Amazon, available since last October. My book, and Christian Mastropietro, my co-author.
Can I ask when part two is coming out? I'm anxiously awaiting.
So as you know, I had some ill health,
Mm-hmm.
and during my ill health, I was in the middle of recording the audible version of part one, and we want to get the audible version done before we start putting a lot of effort into part two. So
Got it.
probably next year part two will come out. And then the main thing, if people are interested in being my student, learning more, like you have, Robert.
Mm.
I mean, first of all, I think there's over 800 hours of free content, and there's a new series coming on YouTube, The Philosophical Silk Road. But if
Amazing.
you want to learn more in depth, I have, an online platform called the Lectern, where you can, and you can participate at various levels of price, asynchronously in class. You can also get one-on-one tutorials. You can buy bundles. It's called the Lectern, Lectern, like what a professor has when he's puts his notes on the Lectern. And you can go there and take courses. I've mentioned a course, the 3-part course I've been teaching, Seeing God Again for the First Time, Einstein and Spinoza's God, Realizing the Imaginal. And next year, 2026, there's going to be people other than me teaching courses, like Mark Miller and Brendan Graham Dempsey and Charles Stang. So the lectern is where to go if you want the kind of education that is the love of wisdom. That's another way you can find what I'm offering on the lectern.
Beautiful. John, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Robert. I hope we talk again soon.
We lock our doors, we encrypt our hard drives, and we use strong passwords. But most people leave one thing wide open: their phone line. SIM swap attacks are one of the fastest growing methods of digital theft. In minutes, a hacker can clone your accounts, reset your passwords, and drain your life. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. It happens every single day. Efani is the only mobile service protection designed exclusively to protect you from SIM swap attacks. Efani offers military-grade encryption on their product and offers up to $5 million of SIM swap insurance. And to date, there have been exactly 0 SIM swaps on any of Efani's over 50,000 protected accounts. So you don't need to live in fear, you just need to protect your weakest link. Go to efani.com/breedlove to secure your phone line today. Again, that's Efani, EFANI.com/breedlove. For the past 25 years, I've been reading roughly 1 book per week. Almost entirely difficult nonfiction books, the kind that really shift your thinking. Books on physics, money, power, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. The real stuff. But I get it. Most people don't have time to read 50 books per year. So I hand-selected my favorite nonfiction books and distilled each one of them into a course that you can take in 50 to 100 times faster than it would take you to read the entire book. Each course gives you the key insights, mental models, and frameworks that matter. We launched with 15 book courses, and we are building toward a library of 100 by the end of year 1. So if you are a seeker of truth, wisdom, and personal growth, then my book course is for you. To sign up, go to course.breedlove.io. Again, that's course.breedlove.io. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.